You may never have heard of Victorian crawlers, but what you're about to hear is an eye-opening account of the most desperately poor people of 19th century London. These forgotten souls huddled on workhouse steps, begged from beggars themselves, and endured unimaginable hardship that will make you shudder. Here's what life was really like for the crawlers of Victorian London. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. Alright, we're heading to Victorian London in a minute. But first though, get comfortable. Seriously, take a second. Adjust whatever needs adjusting. You're not going to want to move once we start. Your eyes open to darkness. Your back is screaming from the hard stone beneath you. Not a gentle kind of pain, but the deep, grinding ache that comes from sleeping on cold workhouse steps for weeks on end. Welcome to your life as a crawler of St. Giles. The woman next to you shifts slightly. She's old, or at least looks it. Hard to tell actual age when poverty has weathered someone's face like a cliff facing the sea. You're both huddled together, not from affection, but from the desperate need for warmth that comes with having no shelter but the doorway of a London workhouse. Unlike your warm bed right now, where you can stretch out freely, you haven't been able to lie down properly for days. You sleep sitting up, head reclining against the workhouse door, a position that brings no true rest, only a strange half-consciousness, a constant dozing that never quite becomes actual sleep. "Can't feel my feet anymore," mutters the woman beside you, her voice barely audible over the distant sounds of carts beginning to move in the early morning streets. "Better that way," you reply. "Mine hurt too much when I can feel 'em." You know the nickname they've given your kind, dosses. It comes from this perpetual dozing state. Even now as we're talking, your eyelids feel like they weigh 50 pounds each, but you're never fully asleep. There's a part of you that always stays alert, even with your eyes closed. One wrong move, one unguarded moment, and what little you have might be taken. The dawn light is starting to creep into the streets of St. Giles, and with it comes your first decision of the day. Your stomach is empty, not the kind of hungry you feel when dinner's running late, but the hollow, painful emptiness that comes from days of inadequate food. You need tea. The warm liquid won't fill you, but it'll chase away the chill that's settled deep in your bones from another night exposed to London's damp air. The woman next to you, Mary, you think her name is, though names matter little in this world, has a broken teapot. No handle, no spout, but it holds liquid, and that's enough. Between the five of you who regularly share these steps, you've managed to collect some used tea leaves from a nearby house. The servants there sometimes take pity. "Think we might get a penny today?" asks Mary, her voice carrying a hope her eyes don't share. "Maybe," you say, though neither of you believes it. A penny. That's all it would take to buy fresh tea leaves instead of the used ones you've collected. 1 penny for a moment of comfort that people with homes wouldn't even think twice about. You glance down at the child sleeping against your side. She's not yours. She belongs to Sarah, who works at a coffee shop several streets over. Sarah leaves her here with you during her shifts, and the arrangement works for everyone. The child gets someone to watch her, Sarah can work, and you get a small bit of human connection, plus the body heat of a small person pressed against you. "She's pushing her head under my chin when it's very cold," you explain to a passing woman who looks at you curiously, "cuddles up to me so that it keeps me warm as well as itself." The child coughs, a wet, concerning sound that speaks of cold and damp and not enough food. But you've heard worse. At least she's alive, which is more than can be said for plenty of children born to your circumstances. It's time to start the day's ritual. Someone needs to go to Drury Lane, where there's a coffee shop keeper who takes pity and gives free boiling water. Without that small charity, there would be no tea, no warmth in your belly to start the day. "I'll go," offers an elderly woman who's just waking up on the step below yours. Her name is Elizabeth, and she's been a crawler longer than anyone else in your group. The lines on her face tell a story of decades of hardship, but there's still a stubbornness in her eyes. "Your legs giving you trouble again," you observe. It's not a question. "Always do in the damp," she replies, struggling to stand. "But sitting here won't make 'em better." You watch as she slowly rises, each movement clearly causing pain. The way she winces reminds you that crawling isn't just a nickname. It's often literally how you move when your body is broken down by exposure and malnutrition. She doesn't actually crawl today, but a shuffling, hunched gait isn't far from it. "Take the kid with you," Mary suggests. "People more likely to help when they see a child." Elizabeth nods, gently rousing the little girl. "Come on, little one, let's go fetch the hot water." The child whimpers but stands obediently. Even at her young age, she knows the rules of survival. Stay close, do as told, don't make noise that might attract the wrong kind of attention. As they depart, you stretch your stiff limbs as much as the cramped space allows. Every joint protests. You're not old, probably somewhere in your 30s, though it's been years since you've seen your reflection clearly enough to really know how you look, but your body feels ancient. "Constable Burke is on today," notes a man who's just arrived at the steps. He's not a crawler, he's a proper beggar with a regular spot near the church, which practically makes him aristocracy compared to you. But he sometimes brings news, or, if he's done well, a crust of bread to share. "Burke's not bad," Mary says. "Doesn't chase us off at least. Unless the superintendent comes by," you add. "Then he has to put on a show." The beggar nods. "Rain coming later," he says. "Going to be a bad one." This news sits heavy between you. Rain means getting soaked through. It means the ague that follows, the shivering that seems to reach your very soul. It means the steps become slippery and even more dangerous. But there's nowhere else to go. "I miss walls," you say suddenly, surprising yourself with the admission. "Real walls. A roof." Mary gives you a sidelong glance. "Don't start with that. No use thinking about what we don't have." She's right, of course. Dwelling on former comforts only makes the present harder to bear. But sometimes the memories slip out anyway. A warm fire, a proper bed, food that wasn't scavenged or begged for. For Mary, it's been 3 years on these steps. For you, just over 1. Your story isn't unusual among the crawlers. You worked as a seamstress before your eyes started failing. Without sight good enough for fine stitching, you lost your position. Without a position, you couldn't pay rent. Without a place to live, you couldn't find new work. One misfortune led to another until here you are, part of the invisible population that London steps around or over but rarely sees. "I heard Martha got work," the beggar offers, breaking into your thoughts, "cleaning floors at some gentleman's house in Mayfair." The news travels through the small group like an electric current. Work, real work. It happens occasionally. One of you escapes the steps. But it's rare enough to be remarkable. "How'd she manage that?" you ask, unable to keep the urgency from your voice. He shrugs. "Got herself cleaned up somehow, found someone to vouch for her." And there's the rub. Getting cleaned up requires resources you don't have. Getting a reference requires knowing people who still respect you enough to put their own reputation on the line. It's a puzzle where all the pieces are just out of reach. The beggar moves on after sharing his news, heading to his spot before someone else claims it. The hierarchy of London's streets is strict and unforgiving. Beggars look down on crawlers, shop owners chase away beggars, the police move everyone along when complaints come in. And at the bottom are you and your companions, too weak even to beg properly, reduced to accepting charity from those only slightly better off. Elizabeth returns with the child and the precious hot water. The tea is made, weak, reused leaves producing something that barely deserves the name, but it's hot and it has the memory of flavour. The broken teapot is passed around carefully, each of you taking a small sip before passing it to the next. There's an unspoken etiquette even here, at rock bottom. Sarah will be by at 4 to get her, Elizabeth says, nodding at the child who's curled up again, already halfway to that same dozing state that characterises all of you. The tea is gone too quickly, leaving behind only the ghost of warmth in your stomach. It's not enough. It's never enough, but it's something. You think of your young life before these steps. The memories feel distant, like they belong to someone else. You've tried to keep your pride. That's one thing the steps haven't yet taken from you. But pride is a luxury when survival is at stake. You've seen others refuse help because it came with conditions they found demeaning. Most of them aren't around anymore. The rain the beggar predicted arrives earlier than expected, a sudden downpour that sends people on the streets scurrying for cover. There is no cover for you except the slight overhang of the workhouse door, and that only helps if the wind isn't blowing the rain sideways, which it often does. "Under the door," Mary commands, pulling the child closer to the scant protection of the workhouse entrance. You all press together, a huddled mass of damp humanity seeking whatever shelter you can find. Within minutes, you're soaked through. Your clothes, the same ones you've worn for months, cling to you like a second skin, cold and uncomfortable. The child whimpers, and you try to shield her with your body, but it's a futile gesture. Everyone gets wet. "Look at them," says a passing gentleman, umbrella held high as he hurries by. Like animals, his companion glances over, face twisted in disgust. Should be cleared away, bad for business having them there. They don't lower their voices, don't consider that you might hear or understand. In their eyes, you're not people. You're an inconvenience, an eyesore, something to be removed rather than helped. The workhouse door suddenly opens, nearly sending those leaning against it tumbling backward. A stern-faced woman peers out, her expression making it clear that she finds your presence objectionable. "Move aside," she orders, blocking the entrance. You shuffle to the edge of the steps, still trying to stay somewhat under the limited shelter of the entryway. The woman watches, arms folded. "You know the rules," she says. "You can come in and pick oakum for 3 days, or you can stay out here. Can't have it both ways." Picking oakum, the punishment task of unravelling old ropes until your fingers bleed, working for hours in exchange for a hard bed and barely edible food. It's considered a deterrent, not a help. The workhouse isn't meant to be comfortable. It's designed to be just barely preferable to death on the streets. And sometimes even that line blurs. "Got a place for the child?" you ask, nodding toward the little girl. The woman's face softens almost imperceptibly. Children's ward, but she can't leave when she pleases like the casual ward. She'd be committed properly, and that settles it. Sarah would lose her child if you took that option. The workhouse separates families as a matter of policy, believing poverty is somehow contagious among relations. "We'll manage," Mary says firmly, pulling the child closer. The door closes, leaving you all back in your original positions, but considerably wetter. The rain continues to fall, and you can already feel the chill settling into your bones. Tomorrow will bring aches, possibly fever, but that's tomorrow's problem. For now, you focus on the small task of surviving the next hour. Then, the hour after that. Breaking life into these tiny increments is the only way to keep going when the future holds no obvious hope. "Tell us about your son again," Elizabeth says to Mary as the rain drums on the stone around you. Mary's expression shifts, a shadow of her former self visible as she speaks of the boy she raised, now a young man of 15 with unjustifiable pride that keeps him from selling matches even as they both starve. "Could be working," she says, her voice carrying both frustration and defence. "Smart lad, but he says there are things he won't do, jobs beneath him." "No job beneath you when your belly's empty," Elizabeth comments. "He'll learn," Mary sighs. "Harder way than needs be, but he'll learn." The conversation drifts, as it often does among the crawlers, between immediate concerns, the rain, the cold, hunger, and distant dreams, a room with walls, steady work, enough food. The chasm between those two realities is so vast that the dreams might as well be fantasy. But they're necessary. Without them, what would be the point of enduring another day on these steps? The child has fallen asleep again, despite the rain and discomfort. Children adapt, you've noticed. They find ways to exist in whatever circumstances they're born to or thrust into. It's a kind of resilience that's both miraculous and heartbreaking. "Someone coming," warns Elizabeth, her eyes fixed on a figure moving purposefully toward your group. It's not the police or workhouse staff. They have a certain way of walking that signals authority and trouble. This is different. A woman, well-dressed, but not ostentatiously so, carrying something under her arm. "You there?" she calls as she approaches. "The child's mother. Is she here?" "Works at the coffee shop," Mary answers cautiously. "Back at 4. The woman nods, coming closer. She looks uncomfortable, like someone forcing herself to complete an unpleasant task. Her gaze keeps slipping away from your faces. "I'm from the Ladies' Charitable Association," she says, her voice clipped. "We've heard about the child being out in all weather. It's not proper care. A chill that has nothing to do with the rain runs through you. The child is now awake, sensing the tension, pressing herself against your side. She's well looked after," you say firmly. "Her mother works, does what she can. Nonetheless," the woman continues, "children should not be raised on the streets. We have an orphanage." "She's not an orphan," Elizabeth cuts in, her voice sharper than you've heard it. "She has a mother who loves her." The charity woman looks pained. Love isn't enough when a child is exposed to the elements, to disease, to unsavory influences. She means you. You and the other crawlers are the unsavory influences she fears will corrupt this child, as if poverty is somehow catching like a disease that might infect her through proximity. "Her mother will be back at 4, Mary repeats, more firmly this time. "Tell her your concerns, then?" The woman hesitates, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she places a small package on the step. "Bread and cheese," she says, "for the child." Then she's gone, hurrying away as if afraid to linger too long near your misery. The package sits untouched for a moment. Pride and hunger wage their eternal battle. Hunger wins, as it almost always does. The food is divided, the largest portion for the child as the intended recipient, but small pieces for each of you. It's the first real food you've had in days. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, knowing it might be long before such bounty comes again. "Ladies' Charitable Association," Elizabeth mutters after she's finished her portion. "Coming for the child next, you mark my words." The thought sits heavy in the damp air. Well-meaning charity often comes with strings attached, with judgments about how the poor should behave, what they deserve. And children are seen as salvageable in a way adults are not. A child might be rescued from this life, while you and the others are considered beyond saving. But that's a worry for another hour. For now, the rain has slowed to a drizzle, and your stomach is less empty than it was. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. The day stretches ahead, hours of discomfort to endure before nightfall brings its own challenges. But you've survived this far. Another day on the workhouse steps. Another day as a crawler of St. Giles. Another day alive when so many in your position are not. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to rest them from the strain of constant vigilance. The sounds of London wash over you, cartwheels on cobblestones, distant shouts from market sellers, the ever-present dripping of water from eaves and gutters. This moment, this exact moment of relative quiet, is as good as it gets, and you know enough to recognize it, to hold it close before the next crisis arrives. "It's stopping," Mary says, meaning the rain. But nothing really stops here on the workhouse steps. It just pauses, gathering strength for the next assault on your already battered defences. You open your eyes to face whatever comes next. The rain has finally stopped. Your clothes are still damp, clinging uncomfortably to your skin, but at least no new water is falling from the sky. Small mercies. Mary shifts beside you, wincing as she tries to find a position that doesn't aggravate her aching joints. The others call her the widow, though she rarely uses the term herself. Her husband was a tailor, died about 10 years back, left her with not much except the skills she'd picked up watching him work. "Tell me about before," you say quietly, as the child dozes against your shoulder. "Your son-in-law's place?" Mary gives you a look, sharp at first, then softening. People on these steps don't usually talk about their before lives. It's like picking at a scab, but sometimes the stories come out anyway, especially on quieter days when the hunger isn't screaming quite so loud. "Not much to tell," she says finally. "My Arthur, that's my husband. He was good with a needle, taught me some, though my eyes were never as sharp as his." She rubs at her eyes now, as if remembering. They're red-rimmed, perpetually irritated from the smoke of London and whatever illness has been slowly claiming her vision. "When he passed, I went to live with my daughter and her husband. He's a marble stone polisher, or was. Health's not good." "Fancy job," Elizabeth comments, clearly trying to picture something so far removed from your current circumstances. Mary snorts. Fancy enough, but he never cared much for his work. That was half the trouble right there. You can picture it easily enough. The tensions in a small home when money is tight and work is avoided. You've seen enough families crumble under lesser pressures. "How long did you stay?" you ask. "Nearly 8 years, she says, a hint of pride in her voice. "Wasn't all bad at first. I helped with the house, with their children, did what tailoring I could while my eyes still allowed it." The way she says it reveals so much. The slow decline of her vision, the gradual reduction in her usefulness to the household, the shifting of power as she became a burden rather than a help. "Stone polisher," mutters the man who's joined your group more recently. You call him James, though you're not entirely sure that's his name. Met one once. Hands like sandpaper. Could strike a match just by thinking about it. Mary nods. "That's the job. But my son-in-law's hands were soft as a clerk's. Like I said, he never took to the work." "What changed?" Elizabeth asks. "After 8 years?" Mary's face darkens. She glances at the boy sleeping a few steps below you, her son, 15 years old but looks younger, painfully thin, with that strange mix of childhood and old age that extreme poverty stamps on the young. "The fighting got worse," she says, finally. "My daughter, her husband, me, the boy. Too many bodies, not enough bread. The things that get said when everyone's hungry." She trails off, lost in memories you can see playing across her face like shadows. Must have been bad, you prompt gently, to make these steps seem better. Wasn't my choice, she says sharply. Then, softer, well, not entirely. I could see what was happening. My presence was making things worse for my daughter. The arguments between her and her husband, sometimes about me, sometimes just with me as the excuse. I thought if I left, maybe they'd have a chance. And the boy, you ask, looking at her son? She sighs deeply, a sound that seems to come from some hollow place inside her. He wouldn't stay without me, stubborn, like his father that way. Elizabeth makes a small noise that might be sympathy or might be judgment. The line between the two gets blurry out here. No one has the energy for pure compassion. So one morning we just left, Mary continues. Took what little was ours, which wasn't much, and walked out. Thought we'd find some place. Work, maybe a room. She laughs then, a short, bitter sound. God, how stupid that seems now, as if jobs and rooms are just sitting there waiting for people like us to claim them. The streets of London were never designed to accommodate the excess of humanity they now contain. Work is scarce, even for the healthy and well-connected. For a woman with failing eyesight and a proud, untrained boy, the city might as well have been walled off. First night was the worst, Mary says, her voice dropping so low you have to lean in to hear her. We walked all day. My feet were bleeding through my boots. The boy was hungry, kept asking when we'd stop, and I had no answer, nowhere to go. You nod, remembering your own first night without shelter, the disbelief that keeps you walking long after your body is begging to stop, the certainty that there must be some solution just around the next corner, the slow, crushing realization that the streets don't care if you have nowhere to sleep. "Where'd you end up?" asks James. "Church steps at first," Mary says. "St. Martin's. Wasn't bad for a few nights, but the constables there are strict. Move you along quick if they catch you." That's how it goes in London, a constant shuffle from one marginally safe spot to another, never settling, never resting properly, until the body gives out enough that even that becomes impossible. Then you become a crawler, too weak to keep up the nomadic existence of the typical homeless. "Boy still has his pride," Mary says, glancing down at her son again. "Won't beg, won't sell matches, says it's beneath him." Elizabeth clucks her tongue, but there's a hint of approval in her eyes. Pride is a luxury none of you can afford, but you understand its appeal. When you have nothing else left, sometimes pride is the only possession that still feels like yours. "He's got no clothes," Mary continues, "everything pawned, covered in rags, but still gives himself airs above his station." She says this last part with a complicated mix of frustration and admiration. The boy stirs in his sleep as if sensing he's being discussed. He doesn't fully wake though. Sleep is precious currency out here, not to be wasted. "How'd you end up here specifically?" you ask, meaning these particular workhouse steps in St. Giles. Mary shrugs. "Heard there was a constable who didn't bother the crawlers much, and it was close enough to the coffee shop where we could sometimes get hot water." She nods toward the sleeping child. Then Sarah started bringing her little one, and it seemed like a good arrangement. The informal networks of London's destitute are invisible to those with homes and jobs, but they're as real and vital as any official institution. Information passes from person to person, which parishes offer bread on which days, which constables are cruel and which look the other way, where to find water, where to shelter when the weather turns deadly. "Boy used to cry at night," Mary says suddenly. "First few weeks, not anymore." You all absorb this simple statement, understanding all it implies. Tears require energy, hope, belief that things should be different. Eventually, the body conserves what little resources it has. Crying becomes an unaffordable luxury. My Agnes is the same, says Sarah, who has appeared so quietly that you didn't notice her approach. She's early today, not yet 4 o'clock when she usually retrieves her child. Doesn't cry much anymore. Sarah looks marginally better than the rest of you. Working at the coffee shop has its benefits. She's indoors for hours each day, occasionally gets scraps of food, and most importantly, has a address of sorts that allows her to maintain a tenuous grip on respectability. But the cost is visible in her exhausted face, the way her hands tremble slightly from overwork. She's been sleeping, Elizabeth tells her, nodding toward the child. Had some bread and cheese earlier. Sarah's face lights up. Bread? Real bread? Lady from the Charitable Association, Mary explains. Came by looking for you, actually. Had concerns. The light in Sarah's face dims immediately. What kind of concerns? You all exchange glances. No one wants to be the one to say it. About the child being out here, Elizabeth finally says. In all weathers. Sarah's shoulders slump. As if I have a choice. As if there's anywhere else for her to be while I work. The charitable associations of London mean well mostly. They distribute food, old clothes, occasionally offer a night's shelter, but their help comes wrapped in judgment, in an unshakable belief that poverty is at least partially a moral failing. Their solution for a child on the streets is almost always the same: removal to an institution where the pernicious influence of her pauper mother can be countered with strict moral instruction. What did you tell them? Sarah asks, gathering her still sleeping daughter into her arms. That you'd be back at 4, Mary says simply. And they left the bread, Elizabeth adds, as if this makes everything better. Sarah nods, but her eyes are worried. She knows, as you all do, that once the charitable ladies take notice, they rarely just go away. They'll be back with more questions, more solutions that solve everything except what really needs solving. I can't lose her, Sarah whispers, holding the child closer. You won't, Mary says, with more confidence than any of you feel. We'll figure something out. This is the strange paradox of your existence. You who have nothing still find ways to look out for each other. The shared teapot, the communal watch over Sarah's child, the pooling of information and what meagre resources you manage to acquire. It's not charity, it's survival. I heard a rumour, Sarah says, changing the subject with obvious effort, about the hop fields. The mood shifts instantly. The hop fields of Kent are a rare bright spot in the year for many of London's poorest. For a few weeks each autumn, there's work to be had harvesting hops for beer making. The work is hard, but the pay is relatively fair, and most importantly, it's available to almost anyone healthy enough to do it. No questions about your background, no permanent address required. Or when? Mary asks eagerly, suddenly looking more alert than she has all day. 3 weeks, they say, Sarah replies. They're taking names at the Bull and Crown for the wagons. For the crawlers, the hop fields represent more than just temporary work. They're a chance, however slim, at escaping the streets entirely. A good season in the fields can mean enough money saved to rent a room, to buy decent clothes, to create the minimum appearance of respectability needed to secure regular employment. We should put our names down, you say, surprising yourself with the surge of hope. Elizabeth shakes her head. Need a shilling deposit for the wagon, refunded when you arrive, but still need it up front. And just like that, the hope flickers. A shilling might as well be £100 when you have nothing. I could... Sarah hesitates, clearly calculating in her head. I might be able to save a little from the coffee shop. Not enough for everyone, but maybe 1 or 2. The unspoken question hangs in the air. Who would get the chance if not everyone could go? Mary should, Elizabeth says firmly. Her and the boy, best chance of making something of it after. Mary looks startled. I couldn't take your chance. My bones won't last a day in the fields, Elizabeth says matter-of-factly. And the rest of us? She gestures vaguely, encompassing the various ailments and weaknesses that define your group. It's true, Mary, despite her failing eyes, is one of the stronger crawlers, and her son, if he could overcome his pride, is young and could earn well in the fields. They have the best chance of turning a hop-picking season into a real escape. My boy would never agree. Mary sighs, too proud to pick hops. Might be time he learned pride doesn't fill empty stomachs, James says bluntly. The conversation is interrupted by a commotion further down the street. A group of young men, clearly drunk despite the early hour, are shouting and shoving each other as they make their way toward the workhouse steps. Trouble, Elizabeth mutters. You all instinctively draw closer together. Street drunks are unpredictable. Sometimes they pass by with nothing worse than insults. Sometimes they're feeling generous and toss a penny or two, and sometimes they're looking for sport at the expense of those who can't fight back. "Wake the boy," you whisper to Mary. She shakes her son's shoulder gently. He comes awake immediately with the instant alertness that street life demands. "What is it?" he asks, voice still thick with sleep. "Just some rowdies," Mary says quietly. "Stay close." The young men are almost upon you now, 5 of them, well dressed enough to suggest trades or clerk positions, old enough to know better than to harass the destitute, young enough not to care. "Well, look here," says the apparent leader, swaying slightly as he stops in front of your group. "A proper collection of dosses." His companions laugh too loudly. One of them mimics your hunched postures, drawing more laughter. "Don't engage," Elizabeth warns under her breath. "They'll tire of it faster. You keep your eyes down, focusing on a crack in the stone step. Experience has taught you that eye contact can be interpreted as a challenge, or worse, as an invitation to further interaction. "Oi! You!" the leader says, addressing Mary's son directly. "You look young enough to work. Why are you sitting with these old wrecks?" The boy stiffens but says nothing. His mother's hand tightens on his arm. "Asked you a question, boy," the drunk persists. Mary's son finally looks up, his face a mask of cold dignity that seems bizarrely out of place given his ragged appearance. "I am employed, sir, simply taking my rest." The lie is delivered with such perfect composure that for a moment even you almost believe it. The formal language, the respectful "sir," the implication that he's merely a working man taking a break. It's a performance designed to create distance between himself and the crawlers he sits among. The drunk blinks, momentarily thrown by the response. His companions exchange glances. "Employed doing what?" one of them asks suspiciously. Mary's son doesn't hesitate. "I assist my uncle in his literary pursuits. He's completing a volume on the economic conditions of the modern city. The fabrication is so specific, so confidently stated, that it creates confusion among the drunks. They weren't expecting articulate responses from the workhouse steps. "He's having you on, Tom," one of the young men mutters. "He's just a beggar." "I assure you, I am not," the boy continues, his voice taking on an even more refined quality. "Though I understand the confusion given my current attire, an unfortunate accident with a cart this morning quite ruined my proper clothes. You can hardly believe what you're hearing." The sheer audacity of the performance and the skill with which he's delivering it is astonishing. This is the unjustifiable pride Mary mentioned, manifesting as a complete rejection of his actual circumstances. The drunks are growing visibly uncomfortable. What started as an easy target for their amusement has turned into something they don't quite know how to handle. "If you'll excuse me," the boy concludes, "I must return to my work shortly. Good day, gentlemen." He delivers this last line with a slight nod, as if dismissing servants. The effect is so incongruous with his ragged appearance that the drunks actually back up a step. "Come on," their leader mutters. "Nothing worth bothering with here." They move on, casting confused glances back at your group as they go. When they're safely out of earshot, Elizabeth lets out a low whistle. "Well, I never," she says, looking at Mary's son with new respect. Where'd he learn to talk like that? Mary's expression is complicated, pride and worry battling for dominance. His father taught him his letters, and he's always had an ear for how the quality speak, picks it up from hanging around the better streets. The boy's face has already resumed its usual sullen expression. The performance, it seems, was for the benefit of the drunks only. "That was quite a story," you say to him directly. "About your uncle's book." He looks at you properly for the first time. "People believe what they expect to hear," he says with a shrug. "Those types expect everyone in our position to be ignorant, surprise them with a few big words and they don't know what to think." There's a sharp intelligence in his eyes that makes his current circumstances seem even more tragic. With education, with opportunities, what might he have become? "That trick won't work with the Hopfield foreman," James says, bringing the conversation back to the previous topic. "They want strong backs, not fancy talk." "I told you," Mary says tiredly, "he won't go to the fields." "I might," the boy says unexpectedly. Everyone turns to look at him in surprise. "If it meant getting off these steps," he continues, not meeting anyone's eyes. "If there was a real chance after, not just more of the same." The possibility of change hangs in the air between you all. It's dangerous hope. Out here, it usually leads to disappointment. But without it, what's the point of continuing at all? £1, Mary says softly. "That's what we'd need to save from the hop fields. £1 would be enough to rent a room, get some proper clothes, have an address to give when applying for work." It doesn't sound like much. To most Londoners, £1 is a significant sum, but not an impossible one. From your current position, it might as well be a fortune. 3 weeks, Sarah says. "I'll try to put aside enough for the wagon deposit." The child in her arms stirs and wakes, blinking up at her mother in momentary confusion before recognition dawns. The simple joy that spreads across the little girl's face at the sight of her mother is a stark reminder of what's at stake here. Not just survival, but the preservation of these basic human connections that give life meaning. "Mama," she says, reaching up to touch Sarah's cheek. "You're early." "Yes, my love," Sarah replies, the weariness in her face momentarily lifted. "I finished my work sooner today." It's another lie, of course. Sarah has likely sacrificed some of her already meagre pay to leave early, probably worried by the charitable lady's visit. But the child doesn't need to know that. "We had bread," the little girl announces importantly. "And cheese." "So I heard," Sarah says, forcing brightness into her voice. "What a treat." The simple exchange, the determined attempt at normalcy despite everything, catches in your throat. This is what separates crawlers from the truly lost souls of London's streets. This stubborn insistence on maintaining the forms of human connection, of care, of hope. "I should get her home," Sarah says, rising carefully with the child in her arms. By home, she means the corner of a shared room in a lodging house where they sleep for the few hours between her evening and morning shifts at the coffee shop. "I'll walk with you," Mary's son offers suddenly, getting to his feet. "Make sure you get there all right." There's an awkward pause as everyone absorbs this unexpected gallantry. Sarah hesitates, then nods with a small smile. "Thank you," she says, That would be kind. As they walk away, Mary watches her son with an expression you can't quite read. First time he's offered to help anyone in weeks, she says finally. The hop fields changed him, Elizabeth observes. Just the idea of them. Don't count on it lasting, James cautions. Hope is cheap until it's time to do the actual work. But there's a shift in the atmosphere on the steps, subtle but definite. The mere possibility of change, of movement, of purpose has altered something. We should try to get some real rest, Mary says, practical as always. If there's any chance of the fields, we'll need our strength. The suggestion would be laughable in other circumstances, as if the hard stone steps and constant exposure could ever provide real rest. But you understand what she means. Conservation of energy, preparation, the small ways you can ready your bodies for the opportunity ahead, should it actually materialize. You settle back against the workhouse door, finding the least uncomfortable position possible. Your clothes are almost dry now, though they carry the damp chill that never quite leaves them in London's perpetual moisture. For the first time in longer than you can remember, you allow yourself to imagine a different future, not a grand one. You're not dreaming of mansions or carriages, just a room, walls, a bed, even a shared one. Work that pays enough to eat regularly. It seems so modest, this dream, so attainable in theory, and yet from the workhouse steps, it might as well be the moon. Still, as you drift into that familiar half-sleep of the crawlers, the image stays with you. A room, a pound from the hop fields, a way back into the world that has stepped over and around you for so long. It's something to hold on to as the afternoon fades toward evening, as London's rhythms continue around you, as your body reminds you with each ache and pain of how far you have to climb just to reach the bottom rung of society again. Your eyes snap open at the sound of approaching footsteps. Even in half-sleep, your body reacts to potential threats or opportunities. The steps are too light for police, too purposeful for a drunk. You nudge Mary, who's dozed off beside you. Someone coming, you whisper. It's late afternoon now. The brief hope sparked by talk of the hop fields has faded into the background, replaced by the more immediate concern that gnaws at you all. Hunger. The footsteps belong to a young woman who works as a maid in one of the nearby houses. She's clutching a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Mrs. Wilson said to bring this, she says without preamble, placing the bundle on the step beside Elizabeth. Kitchen scraps for the child. She glances around, not seeing Sarah's daughter. Where is she? With her mother, Mary answers. Back later, the maid nods, clearly relieved to complete her errand quickly. There's tea leaves in there too, used once, but still good. With that, she's gone, hurrying away as if poverty might be contagious, but she's left behind something precious, kitchen scraps that would be garbage to her employers but are a feast to you. Elizabeth carefully unwraps the bundle. Inside is a collection that tells its own story of a wealthy household's meal. Gristly ends of meat, vegetable peelings, half a loaf of bread gone slightly stale, and a small paper packet of used tea leaves. Christ, look at that bread, James says, his voice reverent. The bread alone is better than anything you've seen in days. Not the heel or crust that you usually fight over, but actual middle slices, just a bit too stale for delicate palates. We should wait, Elizabeth says, though her eyes don't leave the food. Save some for Sarah and the little one. Save the bread, Mary suggests, practical as always, but that meat won't keep in this heat. No one argues with this assessment. The meat scraps are already attracting flies in the warm afternoon air. Better to eat them now than let them spoil. Elizabeth divides the meat pieces with the precision of someone who's turned food distribution into an art. No one gets exactly the same amount. That would be impossible with such irregular pieces, but she ensures that the portions are fair in their own way. More for those who need it most, considering size, health, how long since someone last ate. You receive a piece of gristle with a bit of actual meat still clinging to it. The flavour when you bite into it is so intense that you feel momentarily dizzy. Fat, salt, protein, things your body has been craving for so long that the mere hint of them is overwhelming. Eat slowly, Elizabeth advises, noting how quickly James is devouring his portion. Makes it last longer. Sits better in the stomach too. This is wisdom earned through experience. Eating too quickly after prolonged hunger often leads to sickness, your shrunken stomach rejecting what it most needs. You force yourself to chew thoroughly, to savour each morsel, even though every instinct screams at you to gulp it down before someone takes it away. Good day for scraps, Mary comments between careful bites. Must have been a proper dinner party. Sunday roast, I reckon, James says. Smells like lamb. This casual assessment of your meal's origins would seem bizarre to anyone not in your position, but the crawlers become experts in the cast-off remnants of other people's lives. You can tell a household's wealth by their garbage, can trace the outlines of celebrations through what gets thrown away. The meat, small portion though it is, works a kind of magic on your group. Colour returns to faces, postures straighten slightly, eyes grow more alert. It's not just the nutrition, though God knows you need it. It's the psychological effect of eating something that came from a proper kitchen, that was part of a normal meal. We should make tea, Elizabeth suggests, eyeing the packet of used leaves. When Sarah brings the child back, they can have some too. The ritual of tea-making is sacred among the crawlers, one of the few civilized practices you've managed to maintain despite everything. The leaves from the maid are a treasure, used only once in their household, which means they still have plenty of flavour left for your purposes. I'll go for water, you offer, feeling stronger after the food. The trip to Drury Lane is one you take turns making. It's not far as the crow flies, but when every step requires effort, when your shoes are falling apart and your body aches from sleeping on stone, even short distances become journeys. Take the teapot, Mary says, handing you the broken vessel that serves as your communal property. It's barely recognisable as a teapot anymore. No lid, no handle, the spout broken off long ago, but it holds water, and that's all that matters. You tuck it carefully under your arm, making sure the cracks that have been forming don't widen with the movement. Back soon, you tell the others, leveraging yourself up from the steps with effort. Standing fully upright takes a moment. Your body has grown accustomed to the hunched position of the steps and your spine protests the change. Once you're steady, you begin the walk to Drury Lane. The streets are busy with late afternoon traffic, workers heading home, delivery boys making final rounds, street vendors trying to sell the last of their wares before day's end. You move through this flow of humanity like a ghost, unnoticed and unremarked upon. That's the strange power of extreme poverty. It renders you invisible. People's eyes slide right past you, as if acknowledging your existence would somehow implicate them in your suffering. Occasionally, someone's gaze will catch on you for a moment, their expression shifting to discomfort or pity before quickly moving on. The coffee shop on Drury Lane comes into view, a modest establishment catering to workers and tradespeople rather than the genteel. The owner, Mr. Parker, is one of the few people in London who regularly shows kindness to the crawlers, allowing you to fill your vessels with boiling water when business is slow. You enter cautiously, waiting near the door until he notices you. The smell of coffee and baked goods is so powerful that your recently fed stomach growls embarrassingly loud. "Nah," Mr. Parker says when he spots you. "Water for the steps, is it?" You nod, holding out the broken teapot. "If it's not too much trouble." "Never trouble," he says, taking the pot from your hands. "Just mind you don't scald yourself on the way back. That thing's got no handle for a reason." As he fills the pot from the large kettle that constantly simmers on his stove, you spot Sarah working in the back corner, clearing tables. She doesn't see you, focused on her task, and you don't draw attention to yourself. Better not to remind her employer of her connections to the crawlers. "Where's little Agnes today?" Mr. Parker asks as he carefully returns the filled teapot to you. "Not seen her about?" "With her mother," you answer. "She came early to fetch her." He nods approvingly. Good, good. Weather's turning again. No place for a child out there. The genuine concern in his voice makes you wonder, not for the first time, why this particular man has such compassion when so many others look straight through you. Perhaps he knew poverty himself once. Perhaps he has family who fell on hard times. Or perhaps he's simply one of those rare souls born with an inability to ignore suffering. "Thank you," you say, more heartfelt than the simple words can convey. "Go on then," he says gruffly, seemingly embarrassed by gratitude, "before it cools." The return journey requires even more care than the trip out. The teapot is hot, its contents precious. You curl your body around it protectively as you navigate the increasingly crowded streets. A spill would mean returning empty-handed, or worse, having to wait until tomorrow for another chance at hot water. When you finally make it back to the steps, you find that Mary's son has returned. He sits a slight distance from his mother, his face bearing the closed expression that seems to be his default, but there's something different about him. A subtle shift in posture, a slightly less hostile set to his shoulders. "Sarah?" you ask, carefully setting down the teapot on the flattest part of the step. "Took the child to the lodging house," he answers. "She's got night shift at the coffee shop soon." The others gather around as Elizabeth begins the delicate process of brewing the tea. The used leaves go into the bottom of the pot, swirling in the hot water as she gently agitates it with a stick. "Any word on the hop fields?" you ask Mary's son, curious about what might have prompted his slight change in demeanour. He glances at you, then away. "Stopped by the Bull and Crown. They're taking names starting Monday. Need a shilling deposit like you said." "Did you put your name down?" Mary asks, an edge of hope in her voice. "Didn't have a shilling, did I?" he responds, but without the bitter tone he might have used earlier. "But I asked around. There's a foreman named Watts who takes on first-timers. Pays fair, they say." It's the most you've heard him speak at one go, and the most engaged he seemed in anything since you've known him. The prospect of the hop fields has kindled something in him, a spark of purpose that poverty had nearly extinguished. "Tea's ready," Elizabeth announces. The brewing time is short, used leaves don't need to steep long, and the resulting liquid is pale, more memory of tea than actual tea. But it's hot, and it contains trace amounts of the caffeine and tannins your bodies crave. As with the food earlier, Elizabeth oversees the distribution. The teapot makes its way around your small circle, each person taking a sip before passing it on. There's an unspoken etiquette to this sharing. No one takes too much, everyone is careful with the fragile vessel, lips are wiped before drinking. "Told Sarah about the fields," Mary's son says after taking his turn at the teapot. "She thinks she might be able to get the deposit money. For 2, maybe." Mary's eyes widen slightly. "She'd do that? Why?" He shrugs. "Says she owes us for watching the kid." The simple transaction, childcare in exchange for a chance at the hop fields, makes perfect sense in the economy of the streets. No one here expects charity without reason. Everything is exchange. Everything has its price, even kindness. "If we get to the fields," Mary says carefully, her eyes on her son, "and if we earn enough, we could send back for the others." It's a generous thought, but one that everyone recognises as unlikely. The hop-picking season is short, the work hard, and the pay, while good compared to nothing, is hardly enough to fund multiple journeys or deposits. "One step at a time," Elizabeth says gently. "First, get the deposit, then get to the fields, then worry about the rest." This wisdom, focusing on the immediate challenge rather than distant possibilities, is another survival skill of the streets. Dreams are dangerous luxuries when they distract from the urgent needs of the present. The tea is finished all too quickly, the pot making only 2 rounds before the liquid is gone. But its effects linger. Warmth in your belly, a slight alertness that pushes back against the perpetual fatigue. Might be a church service tonight, James says, changing the subject. St. Andrew's, they give bread after. This information passes through the group with interest. Religious services are one of the few reliable sources of charity, though they come with the expected price of sitting through sermons, often specifically designed to address the moral failings believed to cause poverty. What time? Mary asks. 7, I think. James replies. Temperance meeting after. Elizabeth snorts. Temperance, as if drink is our biggest worry. The absurdity of temperance lectures to people who can't afford food, let alone alcohol, brings a rare moment of humour to the steps. Even Mary's son cracks what might almost be a smile. Still, Mary says practically worth it for the bread. And it's dry inside, you add, glancing at the sky where clouds are gathering again. Might rain later. The calculation is simple. Endure an hour of being told that moral weakness is the cause of your suffering in exchange for bread and shelter from the rain. It's an easy trade when you have so few options. What about the boy? Elizabeth asks, nodding toward Mary's son. Will he come? There's a moment of silence as everyone looks at the young man. His pride has kept him from many such charity opportunities before, deeming them too demeaning. I'll come, he says after a pause. If there's bread, another small victory for practicality over pride. Something is shifting in him, whether from hunger or the prospect of the hop fields or some internal reckoning only he knows. As the afternoon wears on, more crawlers arrive at the steps, drawn by the approaching evening and the relative safety of numbers. Some you know by name, others just by sight. Each has their own story of how they ended up here, though the broad strokes are often similar. Illness, job loss, family breakdown, the merciless mathematics of London poverty where one misfortune cascades into complete destitution. A woman you know as Hannah arrives, taking a spot on the lower steps. She's in her 40s perhaps, though she looks older, with a persistent cough that makes everyone maintain a careful distance. Consumption is one of the many spectres that haunt the crawlers. Passing easily, in the close quarters you're forced to share. Heard there's church bread tonight, she says by way of greeting, her voice raspy from coughing. St. Andrew's at 7, James confirms. We're going. Hannah nods, settling herself as comfortably as possible on the hard stone. Police cleared out the arches yesterday. Everyone scattered. This news travels through the group with ripples of concern. The arches, the spaces under railway bridges where many homeless seek shelter. This means more people competing for the limited safe spaces like your workhouse steps. They won't bother us here, Elizabeth says with more confidence than anyone feels. Burke's on tonight. He leaves us be. The conversation turns to other news from around the neighbourhood. Which parishes are offering relief? Which areas are seeing increased police presence? Which lodging houses might take in someone without the full payment up front? This exchange of information is another survival mechanism, a way of navigating the treacherous landscape of poverty. As you talk, Mary's son slips away without announcement. He returns 20 minutes later carrying something wrapped in newspaper. What's that? Mary asks, suspicion and hope mingling in her voice. He unwraps the package to reveal a slightly bruised apple and half a meat pie that's seen better days. Where'd you get those? Mary demands. Didn't steal them, if that's what you're thinking, he says defensively. Helped unload a cart at the market, payment in kind. It's such a normal transaction, work exchanged for food, and yet it feels momentous, a step back toward the regular world of earning and consuming, away from the passive desperation of the steps. He breaks the apple into quarters, carefully cutting around the worst bruises with a small knife he produces from somewhere in his ragged clothes. The pie he divides with equal precision. Neither would be enough for one person in normal circumstances, but shared between your small group, it's an unexpected bounty. What kind of work? Mary asks as she accepts her portion, clearly trying to sound casual. Just loading, he says with a shrug. Nothing fancy, but the fellow said he might need help again tomorrow. The prospect of regular work, however minor, adds another layer to the cautious hope building among your group. First the hop fields, now this. Small things barely worth noticing in the grand scheme of London's economy, but seismic shifts in your limited world. The pie, though cold and slightly stale, tastes incredible. It's proper food, prepared in a kitchen, sold in a shop, a far cry from the scraps and charity bread that form the bulk of your diet. You savour each tiny bite, making it last as long as possible. Good. In it, Mary's son says, watching your faces as you eat. There's a hint of pride in his expression, a glimpse of what he might be if circumstances were different. A young man bringing home wages, contributing to a household, finding his place in the world. Very good, Elizabeth confirms, finishing her small portion with the careful attention of someone who knows the next real meal is far from guaranteed. You've done well, lad. The simple praise brings a flush to the boy's pale cheeks. Approval is as rare as good food on these steps. Market needs help most mornings, he says, looking at his hands rather than meeting anyone's eyes. Could try again tomorrow. We should all try, you suggest, emboldened by the day's small victories. Different places increase the chances. It's an obvious idea, but one that hasn't seemed worth pursuing when the mere act of surviving from hour to hour takes all your energy. Today, with food in your stomach and the promise of bread at the church later, it suddenly seems possible to think beyond the immediate moment. The afternoon is fading toward evening now, the light taking on the golden quality that briefly makes even London's grimiest corners look almost beautiful. People are heading home from work, the street growing quieter as shops close and workers disappear into lodging houses and apartments. Soon you'll need to head to St Andrew's for the church service if you want that bread. It's a 15-minute walk for a healthy person, which means allowing twice that for your group with its various ailments and weaknesses. Should we go now? James asks, looking up at the sky where the clouds continue to gather. Beat the rain? As if in answer, the first drops begin to fall, just a spatter at first, but with the promise of more to come. The decision is made for you. Church it is, and now rather than later. Everyone begins the slow process of standing, joints protesting, muscles stiff from hours on the hard steps. You help Elizabeth, whose arthritis makes the movement particularly painful for her. You're a good girl, she tells you as she finally gets upright, leaning heavily on your arm. Deserved better than these steps. We all did, you say simply. As your ragtag group prepares to make its way to St Andrews, you cast one last glance back at the workhouse door that has become your home of sorts. It offers little enough protection, yet leaving even this scant shelter creates anxiety. Will other crawlers claim your spots? Will the police move everyone along while you're gone? Will the rain soak the steps so thoroughly that they'll be unusable when you return? But bread and temporary shelter from the rain outweigh these concerns. You join the others as they begin their slow procession toward the church, each step deliberate, each movement carefully calculated to conserve energy, the hope that has been building throughout the day. The hop fields, the market work, the unexpected food carries you forward. Tomorrow might be different. Tomorrow might be the beginning of something else. Tomorrow, perhaps, you won't be just a crawler anymore. For now, though, you are still what London has made you, invisible except when you're a nuisance, desperate enough to make tea from used leaves, grateful for stale bread and scraps, a ghost drifting through the edges of a city that has no place for those who fall. But as you walk beside Mary, watching her son move with slightly more purpose than before, you allow yourself the dangerous luxury of imagining something better. Not a miracle, just a room, a job, a life that doesn't revolve around these steps. The rain begins to fall more heavily, and you quicken your pace as much as your tired body allows. Behind you, the workhouse looms, its shadow stretching across the now empty steps. Ahead, somewhere, is St. Andrew's, with its hard pews, judgmental sermon, and precious bread. You walk on, caught between these two poles of London charity, the institutional coldness of the workhouse and the conditional kindness of the church, knowing that somewhere beyond both must exist a better answer, if only you can find the strength to reach it. The rain falls harder as your group makes its slow way towards St. Andrew's. London in the wet is a miserable place for those without umbrellas or proper coats. The water finds every hole in your shoes, every tear in your clothing. By the time the church spire comes into view, you're all thoroughly soaked. "Might as well have jumped in the Thames," grumbles James, water streaming from his matted hair. "At least we'd be cleaner," Mary jokes weakly. St. Andrew's looms ahead, its stone facade darkened by decades of London soot. The doors stand open, light spilling out into the gloomy evening. Already a line has formed, the poor of the parish coming for the promised bread, willing to endure the sermon for the food that follows. As you approach, you notice the subtle sorting that occurs automatically. Those with homes but little money stand closest to the door, dressed in their shabby but clean church clothes. Behind them are the regular beggars, many of whom you recognise from the streets around St. Giles. And at the very back, by unspoken agreement, are your kind, the crawlers, deemed too ragged, too dirty, too hopeless even for the company of ordinary beggars. "Back of the line," a church warden says unnecessarily as your group approaches. He's a portly man with the righteous expression of someone who believes poverty is a moral failing. "And mind you don't drip on the pews." "Yes, sir," Mary says, her voice taking on the deferential tone that experience has taught all of you to use with those in even minor positions of authority. "Very kind to let us in at all, sir." Her son watches this exchange with barely concealed disgust, but he says nothing. The promise of bread is enough to keep even his pride in check. You join the back of the line, standing in the rain while those ahead of you file into the church. When your turn finally comes, another warden at the door gives each of you a searching look, as if assessing whether you're worthy of entry. He pauses at Hannah, whose wet coughing has grown worse during the walk. "No consumptives," he says firmly. "Health risk to the congregation." Hannah's face falls. "Please, sir, just for the bread. I'll stay at the very back." "Rules are rules," he says, unmoved. "There's the workhouse for your sort." Elizabeth steps forward, her ancient dignity somehow intact despite her soaked appearance. "She comes with us, or none of us come," she says quietly. "Your choice." It's a bluff, and a risky one. The bread is too important to forfeit, but Elizabeth has calculated correctly that the warden wants the church to appear charitable. 6 fewer attendees would look bad for their numbers. The warden hesitates, then waves you all through with obvious reluctance. "Back row only, and control that cough." Inside, the church is warm and dry, 2 qualities that make it seem like paradise after the cold rain. Candles and gas lamps illuminate the space, casting long shadows across the wooden pews and stone floor. The front rows are already filled with the parish's more respectable poor, while the middle section houses the regular beggars. Your group makes its way to the very back, where a few other crawlers have already claimed spots. "Look," Mary whispers, nodding toward the front of the church. "Sarah's here." Sure enough, Sarah is seated in the middle section, little Agnes beside her. She's clearly come straight from the coffee shop, still wearing the apron that marks her as a working woman. The child leans against her mother's side, eyes half closed with exhaustion. You settle onto the hard wooden pew, your wet clothes immediately creating a puddle beneath you. The warmth of the church feels wonderful after the cold rain, though you know from experience that sitting in damp clothes, even in a heated building, will lead to aches and chills later. "Bread better be worth it," mutters Mary's son, shifting uncomfortably on the bench. "It's dry. It's warm. There's food after," his mother reminds him quietly. "More than we'd have on the steps tonight." The church continues to fill as the appointed hour approaches. You notice several members of the Ladies' Charitable Association taking seats near the front, their neat bonnets and dry clothes in stark contrast to the bedraggled appearance of those they've come to help and judge. "That's her," Elizabeth whispers, nodding toward a severe-looking woman in a dark dress. "The one who came about Agnes." You recognize her as the woman who brought bread and cheese for the child earlier, the one who spoke of orphanages and proper care with that particular tone that charitable ladies use when they believe they know what's best for other people's children. "Hope she doesn't make trouble for Sarah," you whisper back. Before Elizabeth can respond, the service begins. The vicar, a thin man with a voice that carries surprisingly well, leads the congregation in a prayer. You bow your head out of habit rather than devotion, your thoughts more focused on the bread to come than the words being spoken. The sermon, when it begins, is exactly what you expected, a discourse on moral improvement as the path out of poverty, with frequent references to the evils of drink, gambling, and loose living. The message is clear: the poor are poor because of their own failings, and salvation, both spiritual and material, lies in moral reformation. "Bit rich, innit?" James whispers, too low for anyone but your immediate group to hear. "Never seen him miss a meal in his life betting." The irony isn't lost on any of you. The vicar, well-fed and secure, lecturing on the virtues of temperance and thrift to people who haven't had a proper meal in days, who count every penny and still can't afford a roof over their heads. Mary's son listens with an expression that grows increasingly stony as the sermon progresses. When the vicar begins a particularly passionate condemnation of idleness as the mother of poverty, you see the boy's hands clench into fists on his knees. "Easy," Mary murmurs, placing a weathered hand over his. "Bread, remember?" The sermon seems to last an eternity, though in reality it's probably no more than 30 minutes. Throughout, Hannah struggles to suppress her cough, earning glares from the warden whenever she fails. The atmosphere in the church grows increasingly stuffy as wet clothes steam in the warmth, creating a fog of damp wool and unwashed bodies that rises toward the vaulted ceiling. Finally, the vicar concludes with a prayer for the moral improvement of his congregation, followed by an announcement about the bread distribution that will take place in the parish hall adjoining the church. "Orderly lines," he instructs, as if speaking to children. "Women and children first, then men. Those from the workhouse steps at the very end." This last directive brings a murmur of discontent from your section, quickly silenced by a sharp look from the wardens. The hierarchy is clear and non-negotiable. Even among the poor, there are divisions, and crawlers are at the bottom. The congregation files out toward the parish hall, maintaining the same invisible but rigid sorting that governed their entry. Your group waits, as instructed, until the very end. As you pass through the doorway connecting the church to the hall, you spot Sarah and Agnes, already receiving their bread from one of the Ladies' Association members, the same severe woman who visited the steps earlier. The woman is speaking to Sarah, her expression concerned but unyielding. Sarah keeps shaking her head, holding Agnes closer to her side. Even from a distance, the tension in the exchange is obvious. Trouble, Elizabeth observes quietly. You make your way to the breadline, moving as quickly as your tired bodies allow. By the time you reach the table where the distribution is happening, Sarah and Agnes have been escorted to a side room by the charitable lady and another woman from the association. "1 piece each," says the man, handing out the bread, barely looking at your group. "Take it and go." The bread is fresh, at least, large leaves cut into thick slices. Each piece would sell for a penny at a bakery, making it a significant windfall for people in your position. You accept your portion with the appropriate show of gratitude, tucking it carefully into a pocket to keep it as dry as possible for the journey back. Mary's son takes his bread without a word of thanks, earning a disapproving look from the distributor, but he's already turning away, his attention fixed on the side room where Sarah and Agnes have been taken. "What do you think they're doing?" he asks his mother, nodding toward the closed door. "Nothing good," Mary replies grimly. "Those ladies have decided Agnes needs saving, I'd wager." The bread distribution continues efficiently, each crawler receiving their portion and moving aside for the next. When everyone in your group has their share, you gather near the exit, reluctant to head back into the rain, but aware that your welcome in the warm, dry hall is limited. "Should we wait for Sarah?" you ask, glancing toward the side room. "Make sure she's all right?" Before anyone can answer, the door opens and Sarah emerges with Agnes in her arms. The child is crying softly, her face pressed against her mother's neck. Sarah herself looks pale and shaken, but there's a determined set to her jaw. She spots your group and makes her way over, ignoring the disapproving looks from the Ladies' Association members who follow her from the room. "They want to take her," she says without preamble, her voice low and urgent. "Say a child needs a proper home, not a lodging house room and workhouse steps. They can't just take her," Mary says, though her tone suggests she's not entirely convinced of this. "You're her mother." "They can, if they decide I'm unfit," Sarah replies bitterly. And a coffee shop girl with no husband fits their definition nicely. The reality of Sarah's situation hits home. Unlike many women in her position, she's managed to maintain employment and keep her child with her, but that precarious balance requires the informal childcare arrangement with your group on the steps, an arrangement that looks like neglect to the charitable ladies who have no concept of the impossible choices facing a single woman in London. "What will you do?" Elizabeth asks, her voice gentle but practical. Sarah adjusts Agnes on her hip, the child's crying having subsided to occasional hiccups. "Don't know yet. They've given me a week to make suitable arrangements or they'll petition for removal." "What counts as suitable?" you ask. "Not leaving her with—" Sarah stops, looking uncomfortable. "With people on the steps. No offence meant. None taken," Elizabeth assures her. "We know how it looks." The brutal honesty of the moment hangs in the air. To the outside world, your group represents the very bottom of society, unsuitable guardians for a child despite the genuine care you provide. The facts of your situation, the shared teapot, the careful division of food, the protection offered against the elements, count for nothing against the visible signs of your destitution. "I could Mary's son begins, then stops, seeming surprised at his own impulse to speak. When all eyes turn to him, he continues reluctantly, "I could watch her somewhere else, not on the steps, if I had somewhere to take her." The offer is unexpected, especially coming from a boy who has shown little interest in anything beyond his own survival until very recently. Sarah looks at him with equal parts surprise and consideration. "The market," you suggest, making the connection. "If you're working there and it's undercover," Mary's son nods slowly. "Manager seemed to think I might be useful. If I had regular work, I could keep an eye on her there. Better than the steps, anyway." "The ladies wouldn't like a market." "Much better," Sarah says doubtfully. "Better than our current arrangement," Mary points out. "And if he's working, being paid, that's respectable. You could say he's a proper childminder you're paying." The plan has obvious flaws. It depends on the boy getting regular work, on the market manager allowing a child to be present, on the ladies' association accepting this alternative. But it's a starting point, a possible way forward that doesn't end with Agnes in an orphanage. "Let me talk to the manager tomorrow," the boy says with newfound determination. "See what's possible." Sarah looks at him for a long moment, clearly weighing his reliability against her limited options. "All right," she says finally, "it's worth trying." "Mrs. Collins," calls one of the charity ladies, approaching your group with obvious reluctance to come too close. "Your shift begins soon, does it not? Perhaps you should be on your way." Sarah straightens, adjusting her expression to one of appropriate deference. "Yes, ma'am, just making arrangements for Agnes, as you suggested." "With these people?" The woman makes no attempt to hide her disapproval. "With William here," Sarah says smoothly, nodding toward Mary's son. "He's employed at the market and has kindly offered to mind Agnes during my shifts, for a fee, of course." The sudden bestowal of a specific name, William, on Mary's son catches you by surprise. You've never heard anyone call him by name before. Whether Sarah made it up on the spot or somehow knew it already, the effect is immediate. The boy straightens slightly, as if the simple act of being addressed as a person with a name rather than the boy or Mary's son has awakened something in him. The charity lady looks sceptical but slightly less disapproving. The market is hardly an appropriate environment for a child. "Better than many alternatives," Sarah counters gently, "and only until I can make more permanent arrangements." It's a masterful performance, deferential enough to avoid offence, but firm in its practical assessment of the situation. The charity lady seems momentarily at a loss for a response. "We shall see," she says finally. "A week, Mrs. Collins. That was our agreement." With that, she returns to her colleagues, leaving your group in a huddle near the exit. The rain continues outside, visible through the open door, but at least it has lessened to a steady drizzle rather than the downpour of earlier. "William, is it?" Mary says quietly to her son, a question in her voice. He shrugs, looking uncomfortable. "'S my name, isn't it?" "Haven't heard you use it in a while," she replies. There's something sad and wistful in her expression, as if the name belongs to a different boy from a different time, before the steps and the hunger and the gradual stripping away of identity that comes with extreme poverty. "Needs a name, if he's going to be respectable," Elizabeth observes practically. "Can't just be the boy if he's working at the market." William, and it's strange even in your thoughts to suddenly attach a specific name to someone you've known only as an extension of his mother, looks both embarrassed and pleased by this small recognition of his personhood. "Better get back to the steps," James says, nodding toward the darkening sky visible through the door. "Beat the night crowds." He's right. As evening deepens into night, the competition for safe sleeping spots intensifies. Your group's regular place on the workhouse steps isn't guaranteed if you're away too long. Sarah adjusts Agnes on her hip again. I should get to work. If I'm late, Mr. Parker might reconsider keeping me on, and then none of this matters anyway. I'll walk part way with you, William offers. Talk more about tomorrow. There's a moment of surprised silence at this continued show of initiative from the formerly sullen boy. Mary watches her son with an expression that mingles hope and wariness, as if afraid to believe in this transformation. Right then, Elizabeth says briskly, "Back to the steps for the rest of us." Your group splits, Sarah and William heading toward the coffee shop, while the rest of you brace yourselves for the journey back to St. Giles. The bread in your pocket feels like treasure, its weight a promise of something substantial in your stomach tonight. Combined with the scraps from earlier, it's been a relatively good day for food, a rarity in the precarious existence of the crawlers. The walk back is slower than the journey to the church. The brief respite in the warm, dry building has allowed your muscles to stiffen, making movement more painful. The rain, though lighter now, still finds its way through your inadequate clothing, and the approaching night brings a deeper chill to the air. "Think the boy will really work the market?" James asks as you trudge through puddles that splash over the broken tops of your shoes. "If there's work to be had," Mary replies. "He seemed different today." The name helped, you observe. William gave him something to live up to, maybe. Elizabeth nods thoughtfully. Names matter. Out here, they're often all we have left. This simple truth resonates with all of you. In the world of the crawlers, where possessions are few and security non-existent, identity becomes both precious and fragile. Some, like Elizabeth, cling fiercely to their names and the histories they represent. Others shed them, preferring anonymity or reinvention. William seems to be reclaiming his, a small but significant step toward rejoining the world beyond the steps. As St. Giles comes into view, you can't help but reflect on the strange, unexpected developments of the day. This morning, your group was focused solely on immediate survival, finding tea, staying dry, avoiding trouble. Now there's talk of the hop fields, market work, childcare arrangements. Plans that extend beyond the next hour or the next meal. Dangerous luxuries, perhaps, in a world where disappointment is the most reliable outcome, but necessary too, in their way. Without some hope, however fragile, the steps become not just a temporary resting place, but a grave. "Someone's in our spot," Hannah says suddenly, pointing ahead to the workhouse steps. Sure enough, a group of unfamiliar figures occupies the prime positions near the door. They're huddled together, their postures conveying the same desperate search for warmth and minimal comfort that characterises all crawlers. Parish clearance, probably, James mutters, pushed out from somewhere else. Territorial disputes among the homeless rarely involve direct confrontation. Few have the energy for physical conflicts, but they're nonetheless tense and potentially dangerous. Space is limited, especially spaces that offer even minimal protection from the elements. "What now?" you ask, looking to Elizabeth and Mary for guidance. As the longest-term residents of these particular steps, they have an unspoken authority in such matters. Elizabeth studies the new arrivals with a practiced eye. Only 4 of them. We're 6. We can fit if they're reasonable. And if they're not, Hannah's voice carries a hint of fear. In her weakened state, another night in the rain could be deadly. "Let's find out," Mary says grimly, leading your group forward. The newcomers watch your approach with wary eyes. They're a mixed group, 2 men, a woman, and what appears to be a teenage girl. All bear the unmistakable signs of prolonged destitution. Gaunt faces, filthy clothing, the distinctive hunched posture that comes from sleeping upright. for too long. Evening, Elizabeth says as your group reaches the steps. Her tone is neutral but carries a subtle assertion of prior claim. Been here long? One of the men, older than the rest, with a matted grey beard, responds cautiously. Couple hours, moved on from Covent Garden, police clearance. These are our regular spots, Mary explains, not unkindly, but firmly. Have been for months. The newcomers exchange glances, clearly assessing whether this is a battle worth fighting. The older man sighs heavily. Don't want trouble, he says. Just need somewhere dryish for the night. Steps are big enough for all, Elizabeth offers, a peace proposition. If we arrange ourselves properly, the relief on their faces is evident, conflict avoided, a place to rest secured, at least for tonight. The newcomers shift, making space for your group to claim the prime positions nearest the door's slight overhang. Bread to share? The teenage girl asks, hopefully, eyeing the visible outline of the church loaf in James's pocket. There's a moment of hesitation. The bread is precious, hard-earned through enduring the sermon and the judgment of the charitable ladies. But there's an unspoken code among the truly desperate. Today's generosity might be repaid tomorrow when fortunes reverse. Half, James decides, breaking his portion and offering it to the girl. Others in your group follow suit, dividing their bread to share with the newcomers. Not evenly. You all keep the larger portion for yourselves, but enough to establish a tentative alliance. As you settle onto the familiar hard stone of the steps, rearranging yourselves to accommodate the new additions, you can't help but wonder about William and Sarah. Will the market job materialise? Will the charitable ladies accept their arrangement for Agnes? Will any of the tentative plans for improvement actually bear fruit, or will they dissolve like so many previous hopes? Thinking about the boy? Mary asks, noticing your thoughtful expression. And Sarah, you admit, and the hop fields, and tomorrow. Mary nods, understanding perfectly the dangerous territory your mind is exploring. One day at a time, she says softly. That's all we can manage out here. She's right, of course. Planning too far ahead invites disappointment, but as you chew your portion of bread, savouring its simple nourishment, you can't quite suppress the feeling that something has shifted today. A door has cracked open, showing a sliver of possibility beyond the grinding cycle of mere survival. The rain has stopped completely now, though the steps remain wet and the night air damp. Around you, the mixture of familiar companions and new arrivals settles into the peculiar half-sleep of the crawlers, bodies upright against the workhouse door, eyes never fully closed. Tomorrow, William will try the market again. Tomorrow, Sarah will begin her week of proving herself a fit mother. Tomorrow may bring news of the hop fields, or new calamities, or simply more of the same endless struggle to exist. But for now, with bread in your stomach and the relative security of numbers around you, you allow yourself to drift toward that strange, vigilant rest that's the closest thing to sleep you've known since joining the ranks of the crawlers. Not peace, exactly, but perhaps, just perhaps, a fragment of hope to carry into the morning. Morning comes, as it always does, too early and too cold. The newcomers from last night are already stirring, gathering their meagre possessions with the practiced efficiency of those accustomed to moving on at first light. Their temporary alliance with your group served its purpose through the dark hours, but daylight brings different priorities. Heading to the river, the older man explains briefly as they prepare to leave. Heard there's work unloading coal barges. Good luck, Elizabeth offers, her voice still thick with sleep. You watch them go with a mix of empathy and relief. Fewer bodies means more space, but also less shared warmth. It's an endless calculation of advantages and disadvantages that governs life on the steps. Mary is already fully awake, her eyes fixed on the street. Watching for William, you realise He never returned last night after walking with Sarah toward the coffee shop. He'll be fine, you tell her, though you have no basis for this assurance. Always is, she replies, but the worry in her eyes betrays her, too stubborn not to be. As the morning light strengthens, illuminating the grime and damp of your surroundings, you notice a figure approaching from the direction of Drury Lane. Not William, but a woman you've seen occasionally on the steps, a tall, bony figure with grey hair visible beneath a tattered scarf. The crawlers call her Scotty because of her distinctive accent, a remnant of a life before London's streets claimed her. "Look who's back," Hannah murmurs, nodding toward the approaching figure. Scotty walks with a peculiar shuffling gait that speaks of exhaustion and inadequate footwear. Her most distinctive feature is the grey waterproof coat she wears, fastened so tightly around her thin frame that it seems in danger of tearing. It's her only protection against the elements. Rumour has it she has no underclothing whatsoever. On her feet are what once might have been galoshes, now reduced to shapeless coverings with no soles. 3 days picking oakum, wasn't it? James asks, as Scotty reaches the steps. Aye, she confirms, lowering herself carefully onto the stone beside Elizabeth. 3 days in Marylebone workhouse for the crime of seeking shelter too often in 1 month. Her voice carries the unmistakable lilt of Scotland, but there's a refinement to her speech that sits at odds with her ragged appearance. Unlike many who've been on the streets for extended periods, Scotty retains a vocabulary and diction that hints at education and better days. "Worth it?" Elizabeth asks, a genuine question rather than judgment. The calculation, 3 days of hard labour in exchange for 1 night of indoor shelter, is one every crawler has contemplated at some point. "Not even slightly," Scotty replies with surprising vehemence. "My hands are raw, my back feels broken, and the food barely deserved the name." She holds out her palms as evidence. The skin is reddened and cracked from the harsh work of unravelling old rope fibres. "Lease you were dry," Hannah offers, punctuating the observation with a wet cough that's grown worse overnight. "Dry and imprisoned," Scotty corrects. "I'd rather take my chances with the rain." There's a fierce pride in her statement that you've noticed before in Scotty. Unlike many on the steps who've been worn down to passive acceptance, she maintains a kind of defiant dignity, a refusal to be grateful for the meagre crumbs of charity thrown her way. "Any tea this morning?" she asks, glancing at the broken teapot that sits beside Mary. "Not yet," Mary answers, "waiting on hot water, but we've bread to share if you're hungry." Scotty's expression softens slightly at this offer. "That's kind, but I'll not take food from those with less than myself." This, too, is characteristic of her, this stubborn insistence on certain principles even when they work against her self-interest. She's thin to the point of gauntness, clearly in need of food, yet her pride won't allow her to accept what she perceives as charity from her fellow crawlers. "Not charity," you say gently, "just sharing what we have today because tomorrow it might be you with something to share." Scotty considers this, then nods once, accepting the rationale that allows her to preserve her dignity. "In that case, I thank you." Mary breaks off a portion of her remaining bread from last night and passes it to Scotty, who accepts it with a formal nod that seems almost comical given your surroundings. She eats slowly with the deliberate care of someone making a small amount last as long as possible. "Any word of your son?" she asks Mary between careful bites. "Not since yesterday evening," Mary replies. "Walked with Sarah toward the coffee shop and didn't come back." Scotty nods thoughtfully. Young men find their way. He seemed to have a new purpose about him yesterday. It's an astute observation from someone who wasn't present for most of the previous day's developments, but Scotty has a way of noticing things, of reading the subtle shifts in circumstances that others might miss. "Where'd you sleep last night?" James asks her, curiosity overcoming propriety. "After Marylebone?" "Embankment," she answers shortly. "Found a relatively dry spot under one of the arches. The embankment is a fair distance away, a long walk for someone in Scotty's condition. The fact that she's returned to these steps speaks to the invisible bonds that form even in the most precarious communities. For whatever reason, she considers this spot and perhaps this group worth returning to." "As if reading your thoughts," Elizabeth says. "Glad you came back to us. Steps aren't the same without your commentary." This draws a rare smile from Scotty, transforming her severe features for a brief moment. "Where else would I go? This is the intellectual centre of London's underclass, is it not?" The joke, for it must be a joke given your circumstances, surprises a laugh from several of you. It's the kind of unexpected wit that makes Scotty something of an enigma among the crawlers. Most people in her position have long since lost any capacity for humour or irony. "I'll get water," you offer, standing and stretching your stiff limbs. "For tea, if Mr. Parker's feeling generous this morning." "I'll come with you," Scotty says unexpectedly, rising with visible effort. "My legs need stretching after 3 days of sitting hunched over oakum." You don't object, though you're surprised by her offer. The journey to Drury Lane isn't difficult, but in her weakened state, every unnecessary expenditure of energy seems unwise. Still, there's a restlessness about her today, a need for movement that you recognize from your own experience. Sometimes sitting still with your thoughts becomes unbearable. The two of you set off, Mary passing you the broken teapot with a grateful nod. The morning is cool but not cold, the sky a uniform grey that promises neither rain nor sun, a typical London day. "How are your eyes?" you ask Scotty as you walk. Her failing eyesight is something she's mentioned before, the reason she lost her work as a tailoress. "Bad on bright days, worse on dim ones," she replies matter-of-factly. "But I haven't fallen once this week, so there's progress." There's something admirable in her refusal to complain about what must be a terrifying affliction for someone in her circumstances. Vision loss for a homeless person means increased vulnerability, greater difficulty finding work, more challenges in navigating an already hostile environment. "May I ask you something?" you venture after a few moments of silence. You may ask, I may not answer. There's no hostility in her tone, just a straightforward setting of boundaries. "I've wondered about your story, how you ended up here." The question feels intrusive as soon as it leaves your mouth, but curiosity has overcome your usual caution. Scotty walks several more steps before responding, her face unreadable. "Why do you want to know?" "Morbid fascination with how the mighty have fallen." "No," you answer honestly. "More trying to understand how any of us end up here, the steps between having a life and having nothing." She considers this, then nods slowly. "Fair enough. It's not a unique tale, mind you, just the usual combination of misfortune and poor judgment." As you continue walking toward Drury Lane, Scotty begins her story, her Scottish accent growing more pronounced as she speaks of her past. "My husband worked at a bank in Edinburgh," she says, a faraway look in her eyes. "Nothing grand, but respectable. We had property, about £2,000 worth at one point." The sum is staggering from your current perspective, an amount that would seem like untold wealth to anyone on the workhouse steps. What happened to it, you ask, unable to imagine how someone could fall from such security to sleeping on stone steps. Or lawyers, she says, the word carrying a weight of bitterness. My husband wasn't skilled at managing money, ironic as that may seem for a bank employee. He placed everything in the hands of lawyers and withdrew sums whenever we needed without keeping track. You can guess the rest. Until there was nothing left. Precisely. She nods grimly. One day they simply informed us that the money was gone. My husband was convinced we'd been robbed, but he had no records of what he'd taken out over the years, no way to prove anything. The story has the ring of truth, not a dramatic catastrophe, but a slow, almost imperceptible slide into insolvency. The kind of decline that happens so gradually that by the time it's recognised, it's too late to reverse. We came to London after that, she continues. My husband thought there would be opportunities here. There weren't, at least not for a middle-aged Scottish banker with a poor head for his own finances. And then, you prompt gently when she falls silent. And then he died, she says simply. Fever. Quick, at least. I was alone in London with no family, no connections, but I managed, found work as a tailoress. I'd always had a neat hand with a needle. You've reached Drury Lane now, the coffee shop visible ahead, but neither of you moves toward it yet, caught in the flow of Scotty's narrative. I had a room, she continues, nothing fancy, just a small place off Tottenham Court Road, kept myself respectable. Then my eyes started failing. She gestures vaguely toward her face. Couldn't thread a needle after a while, couldn't see the stitches properly, lost my position. It's a familiar story in its broad outlines. Illness or injury leading to job loss leading to destitution. But hearing it from Scotty, with her educated speech and evident intelligence, makes the precariousness of everyone's situation all the more stark. None of you are more than 1 or 2 misfortunes away from the steps. I fell behind on rent, she goes on, her voice matter of fact. Landlord turned me out, seized what little I had for payment. I found a bed at a common lodging house. Not ideal, but better than the street. And then, you ask, sensing there's more to the story. Scotty's face darkens. And then, someone stole my clothes while I slept. Every stitch except this. She plucks at the grey waterproof that serves as her only garment. I had it over me as a blanket, so it was saved. The magnitude of this final indignity hits you hard. To lose not just home and livelihood, but the basic dignity of clothing. It's a theft not just of possessions, but of the last remnants of social acceptance. With no clothes, I couldn't seek work, she explains, echoing your thoughts. Couldn't present myself anywhere. The streets were the only option left. You've reached the coffee shop now, but you hesitate outside, reluctant to interrupt her story for something as mundane as hot water. The worst part, she says suddenly, her voice dropping lower, isn't the cold or the hunger or even the discomfort. It's the enforced idleness, this awful, lazy, idle life I'm forced to lead. I would rather have my hands cut and blistered with hard work than sit useless on those steps day after day. The passion in her voice is startling. Most crawlers eventually surrender to their circumstances, finding a kind of numb acceptance. But Scotty burns with frustrated energy, with thwarted purpose. You have a plan, you observe. It's not a question. Something in her manner suggests a mind still working, still plotting a way out. 7 shillings, she says. That's what I could earn weekly at the army stores in Pimlico. I worked there before, in better days. They know me, know my work. But, you prompt, hearing the unspoken obstacle, but I need decent clothes first, an address to give them. Can't exactly say, find me on the workhouse steps if you need me. The coffee shop door opens and Mr. Parker himself emerges, a look of mild surprise on his face at finding you standing outside rather than entering. Water for tea? he asks, noting the teapot in your hands. Yes, please, you answer, if it's not too much trouble. No trouble, he says, taking the pot. As he turns to go back inside, he hesitates, looking at Scotty more carefully. You're the Scottish lady, aren't you, from near the steps? Scotty straightens slightly, a hint of her former dignity visible in her bearing despite her ragged appearance. I am. Thought so. Sarah mentioned you, said you were educated, could read and write well. I can, Scotty confirms, a cautious note in her voice, as if uncertain where this conversation is leading. Mr. Parker nods thoughtfully. I've bills and accounts that need sorting, books that need keeping. Not regular work, mind you, just an afternoon here and there, but it's indoors, and it pays. The offer hangs in the air between them. You hold your breath, afraid that Scotty's pride might cause her to refuse what could be a critical opportunity. My appearance is hardly suitable for your establishment, she says after a moment, gesturing at her ragged state. Mr. Parker shrugs. Backroom work. No one would see you but me and the kitchen boy, and Sarah, of course. You can see the calculation happening behind Scotty's eyes, weighing pride against opportunity, dignity against necessity. When would you need this assistance? She asks finally. Tomorrow afternoon would do, he replies. 2 hours to start. 6pence for your trouble. 6pence, a paltry sum to most working Londoners, but a fortune to someone on the steps, enough for a night's lodging in a decent house, or a meal that wasn't scraps, or saved toward those decent clothes she needs for real employment. I'll be here, Scotty says, with simple dignity. Thank you. Mr. Parker disappears inside with the teapot, leaving you and Scotty standing in momentary silence, absorbing what's just happened. Well, you say finally, that's unexpected good fortune. Fortune had little to do with it, Scotty responds, but there's a lightness in her voice that wasn't there before. Sarah put in a word, clearly, and Mr. Parker needs help he can get cheaply. Still, you persist, it's an opportunity. A small one, she acknowledges, but yes, it's something. A beginning, perhaps. You wait in companionable silence for Mr. Parker to return with the water. When he does, the teapot is steaming, the water freshly boiled. Careful now, he warns, handing it to you. It's hot enough to scald. Thank you, you say, accepting it carefully, for everything. He waves away your gratitude with the embarrassment of someone unused to being thanked for basic kindnesses. Off with you now. Got customers coming soon. The walk back to the steps is slower than the journey out, both of you concentrating on not spilling the precious hot water, but there's a different energy between you now, a sense of possibilities opening, however small. Will you tell the others? You ask, nodding toward the steps that are now visible in the distance. About the work with Mr. Parker? Scotty considers this. Yes, she decides, not to boast, but because it might matter to them too, to know that escape is possible, even if just for 2 hours at a time. You understand perfectly. In the world of the crawlers, hope is both dangerous and necessary. Too much leads to crushing disappointment. Too little leads to surrender. The delicate balance, realistic expectations tempered with just enough optimism to keep moving forward, is essential for survival. As you approach the steps, you see that William has returned. He sits beside his mother, talking animatedly, his usual sullenness replaced by something close to enthusiasm. Whatever happened after he left with Sarah yesterday, it seems to have continued his transformation. Look who's back, you say to Scotty, nodding toward the boy. And changed, she observes with her usual perceptiveness. Something's lit a fire in that one. You rejoin the group, carefully setting down the teapot in its usual place. Elizabeth immediately begins the ritual of brewing, stirring the hot water with the used leaves from yesterday to coax whatever flavour might remain. Scotty has news, you announce, giving her an encouraging nod. All eyes turn to the tall Scotswoman who straightens her thin shoulders before speaking. Mr. Parker at the coffee shop has offered me some work, accounting, bookkeeping, tomorrow afternoon. The news is met with a mixture of surprise and cautious approval. In the unspoken hierarchy of the steps, any movement toward legitimate employment raises one's status immediately. Well done, Mary says warmly. That's good news indeed. What about you, lad? Elizabeth asks William. You seem in better spirits today. William nods, a hint of a smile playing around his mouth. Market manager says he can use me 3 mornings a week. Regular work, regular pay. And he doesn't mind if Agnes is with me while I'm there. This announcement causes a stir of excitement. Regular work for William, a solution for Sarah's childcare problem. These are significant developments in the small world of the steps. Did you sleep there? Mary asks her son. At the market? He nods again. Manager let me stay in the storage room. It's warm, at least, and there's a chance of more work if I prove reliable. As Elizabeth distributes the tea, passing the pot carefully from person to person, you're struck by the subtle but significant shift that's occurred in just 24 hours. Yesterday, your group was focused entirely on immediate survival. Today, there are threads extending outward. William's market work, Scotty's bookkeeping, the continued hope of the hop fields. Small things, easily broken but real nonetheless. To better days, James says unexpectedly as he accepts the teapot, raising it in a mock toast before taking his sip. Better days, the rest of you echo, the simple phrase carrying the weight of all your cautious hopes. The tea is weak, barely flavoured, but it's hot and it's shared. And for this moment, on the workhouse steps in the grey London morning, it tastes surprisingly like possibility. The weather holds through midday, the grey sky neither improving nor worsening. A small mercy, but one you've learned to appreciate. On the steps, even the absence of new misery counts as good fortune. William left for the market hours ago, his newfound purpose visible in his straightened posture and quickened step. Scotty departed shortly after, mentioning something about preparing for tomorrow's work at the coffee shop, though what preparation might be possible in her circumstances remains a mystery. Hope she's not spending what little she has on clothes, Elizabeth comments, watching Scotty's tall figure disappear around a corner. Parker won't care what she's wearing for backroom work. Pride, Mary says simply, hard to let go of, even here. You understand perfectly. Pride is often the last possession surrendered, sometimes valued above food or warmth or safety. For Scotty, with her memories of better days, it seems especially precious. The conversation drifts, as it often does on the steps, between immediate concerns and distant hopes. Hannah's cough is worse today, deep and wet in a way that worries everyone, though no one mentions it directly. James has heard rumours of a new soup kitchen opening near Covent Garden, though the details are vague. Elizabeth's knees are paining her more than usual, a sure sign of changing weather despite the temporarily dry sky. Hop fields, Mary says suddenly, returning to the topic that has occupied much of your collective thinking. If William keeps this market work, and if Sarah helps with the wagon deposit, she doesn't finish the thought, but she doesn't need to. The possibility hangs in the air between you, a way out, a chance, however slim, at something better than the steps. One day at a time, Elizabeth cautions gently, always the voice of hard-earned wisdom. Market work today, hop fields when they come. The peaceful lull of the afternoon is broken by the arrival of a constable. Not Burke, your usual and relatively sympathetic guardian, but a newer man, whose name you don't know. His expression as he approaches suggests that his visit won't be a pleasant one. "Moving you lot along," he announces without preamble. "Orders from above. Steps need to be clear for inspection." "Inspection?" Elizabeth asks, not moving from her spot. "What inspection?" The constable's face hardens at the question, as if the mere act of seeking information constitutes insubordination. "Workhouse commission, coming to assess conditions. Can't have you cluttering the entrance, making the place look bad." The irony is so perfect it would be laughable if it weren't so bitter. The workhouse, designed ostensibly to assist the destitute, needs to hide the actual destitute from those coming to evaluate it. The steps must be cleared not to help you, but to create the illusion that help isn't needed. "Where are we supposed to go?" Mary asks, her tone carefully balanced between deference and desperation. "Not my concern," the constable replies with practised indifference. "Just need these steps clear within the hour. After that, do what you like." With this dismissal, he turns and walks away, duty discharged, conscience apparently unbothered by the fact that he's just rendered several vulnerable people temporarily homeless from their already inadequate refuge. "Well," James says after a moment of stunned silence, "that's torn it." "Just for a few hours," you suggest, trying to sound more hopeful than you feel. "We can come back after the inspection. If someone else doesn't claim the spot," Hannah points out, her voice rough from coughing. "News travels fast when there's a good doorway free." She's right, of course. In the ruthless geography of street survival, prime locations rarely remain unclaimed for long. The workhouse steps, with their slight overhang and central location, are coveted territory. "We need somewhere to wait it out," Elizabeth says practically. "Somewhere dry, if possible." She glances meaningfully at the darkening sky, where the clouds have begun to gather into more ominous formations. The options are limited. Parks offer no shelter, shops will chase you away. Churches are generally locked between services. The public houses might allow you to sit if you had money to spend, which none of you do. A library, James suggests, the one on Great Russell Street, sometimes lets us sit if we're quiet and don't smell too bad. It's a possibility, but a distant one. Great Russell Street is a long walk for those in your condition, and the librarian's tolerance for obviously homeless visitors is inconsistent at best. "St. Martin's Porch," Hannah counters. "Deeper than most, room for all of us if we squeeze." This suggestion has more immediate appeal. St. Martin's is closer, and its entrance portico does indeed offer better protection than most. The downside is its popularity. You likely won't be the only ones seeking its shelter. St. Martin's, Elizabeth decides, her status as the group's unofficial leader once again unchallenged. Before the rain starts. The decision made, you all begin the laborious process of gathering your few possessions. For most, this consists of little more than tucking the precious broken teapot into a safe pocket, checking that any hoarded food scraps are secure, perhaps adjusting a particularly treasured rag used as extra padding or insulation. As you prepare to leave the familiar security of the steps, you're struck by a wave of what can only be described as homesickness, an irrational but powerful attachment to this uncomfortable corner of stone that has been your one constant in a world of uncertainty. "Will the boy know where to find us?" Mary asks anxiously, looking down the street as if William might materialise at any moment. "He's smart," Elizabeth reassures her. "He'll figure it out, or come back when the inspection's done." This satisfies Mary, or at least quiets her immediate concern. With visible reluctance, your group finally vacates the steps that have been your home base for months. The constable watches from a distance, making sure the eviction is complete before moving on to his next task. The walk to St. Martin's is slow and difficult. Hannah struggles with every step, her breathing laboured, her coughing near constant now. James and Elizabeth flank her, offering support without making it obvious, preserving her dignity while ensuring she doesn't collapse. The sky continues to darken, the threat of rain becoming more imminent with each passing minute. The air has that peculiar heaviness that precedes a downpour, thick with moisture not yet released. "Going to be a bad one," James observes, looking up at the looming clouds. "Feel it in my bones." The others nod in agreement. You've all developed a weather sense that has nothing to do with scientific knowledge and everything to do with survival. You can feel an approaching storm in your joints, your scars, your old injuries, the physical record of hard lives made harder by exposure. St. Martin's comes into view just as the first fat drops begin to fall. Its portico is already occupied, as you feared, a collection of street sellers, beggars, and a few who appear to be crawlers like yourselves. But there's space, just barely, if everyone squeezes together. The occupants eye your approach with the wariness of those for whom new arrivals mean less space, potentially more attention from authorities, but there's also recognition, the unspoken solidarity of shared circumstances. "Room for a few more?" Elizabeth asks, her dignity somehow intact despite her bedraggled appearance. A grizzled man who seems to be the unofficial spokesman for the group shrugs. "If you don't mind close quarters." "We're used to close," she replies with simple truth. The existing occupants shift, making space for your group in the sheltered area. It's tight, uncomfortably so, but it's dry as the rain begins to fall in earnest, sheeting down just beyond the edge of the portico. "Workhouse inspection," James explains to no one in particular, though the question of why you're seeking shelter in the middle of the day hangs unspoken in the air. "Bastards," someone mutters from the back of the group. "Same at St. Giles last month, cleared everyone out, brought in new linens just for show, took 'em away again after." This information is met with knowing nods. The performance of charity for official visitors is a familiar concept to anyone who spent time in London's institutions for the poor. The rain intensifies, drumming against the stone steps beyond your shelter. The sound would be soothing in other circumstances, if you were inside a proper building, if you had dry clothes and a full stomach, if you knew the rain couldn't reach you. As it is, the noise serves as a constant reminder of your precarious position, of how quickly comfort can turn to misery with just a few feet of difference. Hannah's coughing grows worse in the damp air. She tries to muffle it, aware that persistent coughing makes others nervous in close quarters, but the effort only seems to make the spasms more severe. "Here," says a woman you don't know, offering Hannah a small dirty bottle. "Bit of cough syrup. Won't cure what ails you, but might ease it some." Hannah accepts with murmured thanks, taking a careful sip of the dark liquid. Whether it's actual medicine or just watered-down alcohol is impossible to tell, but the gesture itself, this sharing of scarce resources among strangers, is a small reminder of humanity persisting in inhuman conditions. Time passes slowly in the portico, with nothing to do but watch the rain and listen to the sounds of the street, cartwheels splashing through puddles, the occasional shout of a vendor, the continuous backdrop of water falling. Each minute stretches into what feels like hours. Conversation ebbs and flows among the sheltered group. Some sleep, the skill of dozing upright perfected through necessity. Others talk in low voices about the usual topics, where food might be found, which areas are being policed heavily, what churches or missions are offering relief. The geography of survival, mapped through shared knowledge. Ever been to the hop fields? you ask the grizzled man who seems most familiar with the area. He nods, his eyes brightening slightly at the question. 3 seasons past. Good money if you've got a strong back and quick hands. We're thinking of trying this year, you say, including your whole group in the tentative plan, if we can manage the deposit for the wagon. Worth it, he confirms. Worked half a season, came back with almost 15 shillings. Enough for a room and decent clothes, at least for a while. The sum sounds enormous from your current perspective, a fortune that could transform your circumstances completely. It feeds the fragile hope that has been building since the first mention of the hop fields. Weather's the thing to watch, he continues, warming to his topic. Rain like this during picking season can ruin the whole crop. No hops, no work. This sobering reminder of how factors entirely beyond your control might determine your fate dampens the momentary optimism. Even this potential escape route depends on favourable circumstances, on luck rather than just effort. The rain shows no sign of abating as the afternoon wears on. If anything, it intensifies, the individual drops merging into solid sheets that turn the street into a shallow river. Even with the shelter of the portico, the wind occasionally drives spray onto the huddle grue, adding to the general dampness that seems to permeate everything. Someone coming, James alerts suddenly, nodding toward a figure approaching through the downpour. It's William, soaked through but moving with purpose. He spots your group in the portico and changes direction, splashing through puddles without apparent concern for his already saturated state. Been looking all over, he says, as he reaches the relative shelter, water streaming from his ragged clothes. Constable said you'd been moved on, checked 3 churches before this one. You're drenched, Mary scolds, but the relief in her voice undermines any attempt at sternness. Should have waited out the rain. William shakes his head, sending droplets flying. Couldn't. Important news. He pauses, seeming to realise that his announcement has drawn attention from the entire sheltered group, not just his immediate circle. Lowering his voice, he continues, Market manager says he can use me every day next week. Full days, not just mornings, 6p daily. The significance of this news is enormous. 6p a day for 6 days would mean 3 shillings a week. Not a living wage by London standards, but a fortune compared to nothing. Enough for food beyond scraps, perhaps even enough to contribute toward the hop field deposit. That's wonderful, Mary says, her voice thick with emotion. Proper work, proper pay. William nods, accepting her praise with less embarrassment than he might have shown just days ago. And there's more. Sarah's talked to the charitable ladies again. They've agreed to give her more time if she can show Agnes is being properly cared for during her shifts. The market counts as suitable arrangements since I'll be working regular. This additional piece of good news ripples through your immediate group. Sarah's precarious hold on her daughter has been strengthened, William has secured regular employment, and the overall trajectory seems, for once, to be upward rather than downward. Did you see Scotty in your travels? Elizabeth asks, practical as always. She went off earlier, said something about preparing for tomorrow. William shakes his head. No sign of her, but I did see that constable again. Burke, the decent one, said we can go back to the steps after 6. Inspection will be done by then. The news that your eviction is only temporary brings another wave of relief. The steps may be cold and hard, but they're familiar, and in the harsh geography of street life, known discomforts are preferable to unknown ones. The rain continues unabated as afternoon slides toward evening. Hannah's cough worsens despite the borrowed medicine, each spasm shaking her thin frame with frightening intensity. James and Elizabeth exchange concerned glances over her bent head, a silent communication born of long experience with illness among the destitute. The chances of recovery without proper shelter, food, and medicine are vanishingly small, and you all know it. Should try the infirmary, James suggests quietly, not directly to Hannah, but to the group at large. They sometimes take cases like hers. Hannah shakes her head without looking up. No infirmaries, no institutions. Seen too many go in, not enough come out. Her fear is well-founded. London's infirmaries and hospitals, while nominally charitable, are often grim places where the poor receive cursory care at best. Many enter with one ailment only to contract something worse from the crowded wards and unsanitary conditions. Just a thought, James says, backing down immediately. No one on the steps challenges another's choices about their own survival. The autonomy to decide how to manage your own misery is often the only freedom left. As 6 o'clock approaches, the rain finally begins to slack, though the streets remain flooded with standing water and the air hangs heavy with moisture. Your group prepares to leave the portico, thanking the other occupants for sharing their limited shelter. "Good luck with the hops," the grizzled man says as you depart. "Hope it works out for you." "Same to you," Elizabeth replies with genuine warmth. "Stay as dry as you can." The journey back to the workhouse steps is slower and more difficult than the outward trip. Hours of sitting in damp clothes in the confined space of the portico have stiffened joints and exacerbated the various ailments that plague your group. Hannah struggles most visibly, each step clearly causing pain, her breathing laboured between coughing fits. The city has a washed-out, bedraggled appearance after the heavy rain. Gutters overflow, refuse floats in murky puddles, and even the normally bustling streets are relatively quiet, as if London itself is waiting for better weather before resuming its usual pace. When the workhouse comes into view, you're relieved to see that the steps are indeed vacant. The inspection has concluded, the officials departed, and your unofficial home is available once more. But as you draw closer, a new problem becomes apparent. "It's flooded," Mary says, stating the obvious, as you all stare at the bottom 3 steps, which are now submerged under several inches of standing water. The workhouse sits at a slight depression in the street, and the heavy rain has collected exactly where you need to be. The upper steps are relatively dry, but there aren't enough of them to accommodate everyone in your usual arrangement. Higher ground tonight, Elizabeth decides, already calculating how to make the best of the situation. Tighter quarters, but at least we won't be sitting in water. No one argues. The modified arrangement will mean less personal space, more direct contact with each other, but the alternative, wet stone in contact with already damp clothing, would be far worse. In the cold of a London evening after rain, such conditions can be deadly, particularly for those already weakened like Hannah. As you settle onto the upper steps, arranging yourselves in a new configuration that maximizes the use of the limited dry space, a familiar figure appears at the corner of the street. Scotty, James identifies her first, his eyesight still relatively sharp despite everything else that's failing. It is indeed Scotty, moving with her characteristic shuffling gait, but there's something different about her appearance. As she draws closer, the change becomes apparent. She's wearing a shawl that wasn't part of her meagre wardrobe this morning. It's threadbare and patched, clearly second-hand or worse, but it's an addition to her perpetual grey waterproof. "Found you," she says by way of greeting as she reaches the steps. "Checked the usual spot first, then heard about the inspection and guessed you might have been moved on." "Where'd you get the shawl?" Mary asks, practical as always and never one to dance around a direct question. Scotty's chin lifts slightly, a gesture of dignity that seems instinctive rather than calculated. "Mission House on Tottenham Court Road. They know me from before, when I still had a room nearby." This explanation raises as many questions as it answers. Scotty has never mentioned any ongoing connection to charitable institutions, has in fact been vocally critical of most organised efforts to help the poor. They just gave it to you? Elizabeth asks, her tone carefully neutral. Not exactly, Scotty admits after a pause. I'm to attend their Sunday service and their temperance meeting after. The price of charity is always compliance in one form or another. For Scotty, with her fierce independence, agreeing to sit through religious instruction and temperance lectures must have been a significant concession. For the work tomorrow, you guess, understanding dawning, you wanted to look more presentable. Scotty nods, a flash of something like embarrassment crossing her features. Foolish vanity, perhaps, but I couldn't bear to face Mr. Parker in just this. She gestures at her worn grey coat, not for proper work with numbers and accounts. No one contradicts her or suggests that her pride might be misplaced. In your world, where so much has been stripped away, these small assertions of dignity are not just understandable, but necessary. She joins your reconfigured arrangement on the upper steps, fitting herself into the limited available space with careful consideration for Hannah, whose condition has clearly deteriorated during the day. Bad chest, she observes, looking at Hannah with concern. Need to get her inside somewhere. She won't go to the infirmary, James informs her. Can't say I blame her. Scotty nods, understanding perfectly. What about the casual ward here, she suggests, nodding toward the workhouse door behind you, just for a night or two, until the worst passes. 3 days picking oakum if they let you in, Elizabeth reminds her. You said yourself it wasn't worth it. Different calculation when you're coughing like that, Scotty points out, and they have to take the sick, at least in theory. Hannah shakes her head weakly. Rather take my chances here, she insists between coughs, with friends. The simple designation, friends, not just fellow crawlers or companions in misery, touches something in all of you. For all its hardships, the community of the steps offers something that institutions cannot, a form of care that comes without conditions or judgment. We'll keep you warm, Mary promises, shifting closer to share her body heat, and William might bring back something from the market tomorrow. Proper food helps healing. The mention of William reminds you that he hasn't yet returned from whatever errand took him away after showing you back to the steps. As if summoned by the thought, he appears around the corner, moving quickly despite the puddles still covering much of the street. Look what I found, he calls as he approaches, unusual excitement in his voice. In his arms is a bundle of what appears to be rags or old clothing. As he reaches the steps, he unwraps his burden to reveal what's causing his excitement. Blankets, 3 of them. Ragged and patched but unmistakably actual blankets, not just the assorted pieces of cloth or newspaper that usually serve as your covering. Where on earth, Mary begins, clearly torn between delight at this treasure and concern about how it was acquired. Market manager, William explains quickly. End of day, he was clearing old stock that got damp in a leak. These were going to be thrown out. Asked if I wanted them, said yes before he could think better of it. The blankets are indeed damp in spots, and they smell strongly of the market, a mixture of vegetables, earth, and the indefinable odour of too many people in too small a space. But they're whole, they're thick, and most importantly, they're a barrier between your bodies and the cold night air that's settling over London. Proper miracle, Elizabeth declares, running her gnarled hands over the rough wool with something close to reverence. William distributes his bounty with careful consideration. 1 blanket to Hannah, whose need is greatest, 1 shared between his mother and Elizabeth, the eldest of your group, and 1 for the remaining 3 of you to divide as best you can. It's a small thing, objectively speaking. 3 worn blankets for 7 people, all still sitting on hard stone steps in damp clothing after a day of being moved from place to place at others' whim. But in the context of your existence, it represents an almost unimaginable luxury, a cushion against the harshest edges of your circumstances. As night falls fully and the streets empty of all but the most desperate or determined, your reconfigured group settles into the familiar pattern of half-sleep that defines the crawler's existence. The blankets make a noticeable difference, not comfort by any normal standard, but a significant improvement over your usual condition. The events of the day swirl in your mind as you drift toward that vigilant, dozing state. The unexpected eviction, the hours in St. Martin's portico, William's continued good fortune at the market, Scotty's new shawl and tomorrow's promised work. So much change in such a short time, after months of grinding sameness. Do you think it will last? You find yourself asking softly, the question directed at everyone and no one. "What?" James responds from beside you, his voice already thick with approaching sleep. "All of it," you clarify. William's work, Scotty's bookkeeping, the hope for something better. There's a long silence, broken only by Hannah's ragged breathing and the distant sounds of London at night. Just when you think no one will answer, Elizabeth's voice comes from the darkness, carrying the weight of her years and experience. "Some of it might," she says simply. "Some of it won't, but tonight we have blankets and tomorrow some of us have work. That's more than we had yesterday." In the harsh reality of life on the steps, this modest assessment is as close to optimism as wisdom allows. You let it settle over you like another blanket, thin but better than nothing, as you surrender to the closest approximation of rest that your circumstances permit. Morning arrives with a pale, watery sun that does little to dry the lingering puddles from yesterday's downpour. Hannah's condition has worsened overnight, her cough now accompanied by a wheeze that seems to come from deep in her chest. She hasn't spoken since dawn, conserving her energy for the simple task of breathing. "We need to get her inside somewhere," Elizabeth says quietly, the lines in her face deepening with concern. "She won't last another night out here." Mary nods agreement, her hands busy arranging one of the precious blankets more securely around Hannah's shivering form. The mission house on Drury Lane sometimes takes in the sick. No picking oakum, just bed rest. If they have space, James adds, and if they don't think it's consumption. The unspoken reality hangs in the air between you. Consumption, tuberculosis in medical terms, though few on the steps use such language, is feared above almost all other ailments. Its contagious nature means that those suspected of having it are often turned away from even the most charitable institutions, left to waste away on the streets rather than risk infecting others. "It's not consumption," Mary insists, though her tone lacks conviction. "Just a bad chest cold from the rain." No one contradicts her, though the bluish tint to Hannah's lips and the blood-flecked spittle at the corner of her mouth tell a different story. Whether it's acute pneumonia or the more chronic wasting disease matters little in practical terms. Without proper care, warm shelter and adequate nutrition, her chances are grim either way. "I'll go to the mission after breakfast," Elizabeth decides. "See if they'll take her. Worth asking, at least." William has already left for his market work, departing before dawn with a promise to bring back whatever food he can salvage from the day's trading. Scotty is preparing for her first afternoon of bookkeeping at Mr. Parker's coffee shop, meticulously cleaning her face and hands with a small portion of the water meant for tea. "First impressions matter," she explains when she catches you watching her careful ablutions. "Even for backroom work." You understand her concern. This opportunity, however modest, represents her first step back toward the respectable world she once inhabited. The small details, clean hands, neatly arranged shawl, hair smoothed as best as possible without proper tools, are her armour against the judgment that awaits anyone visibly marked by extreme poverty. "You'll do wonderfully," you assure her. "Numbers don't care what you're wearing." She offers a rare smile, brief but genuine. True enough, though Mr. Parker might. The morning's tea is even weaker than usual, the same leaves now used for the third time, barely tinting the hot water that James fetched at dawn. Hannah refuses her share with a slight shake of her head, conserving her strength. The others accept the meagre comfort of warm liquid without comment, passing the broken teapot with the careful reverence that shared scarcity engenders. "I should head to the mission now," Elizabeth says after finishing her portion, "before they fill up for the day. I'll help you with Hannah," you offer, knowing that Elizabeth's arthritis makes supporting another person's weight particularly painful. "Me too," James volunteers. "Three of us should manage." Hannah makes a small sound of protest, but lacks the strength for more substantial objection. Her independence, that fierce self-determination that characterizes so many who survive on the streets, is eroding under the weight of her illness. It's a surrender you've seen before, the body's needs finally overriding the mind's resistance. "Just to see," Elizabeth soothes her. "No commitments. If you don't like it, we bring you straight back." This compromise seems to satisfy Hannah, or at least exhaust her capacity for argument. With careful coordination, the three of you help her to her feet. She's lighter than you expected, her frame reduced by weeks or months of inadequate nutrition to little more than skin stretched over bone. "Mary, save our spots," James instructs as your small procession prepares to depart. "And tell William where we've gone when he gets back." Mary nods, settling more firmly onto the step as if physically claiming the territory for all of you. In the precarious geography of street life, leaving your established place, even for good reason, always carries the risk that it won't be there when you return. The journey to the Drury Lane mission is slow and halting. Hannah can walk, but just barely, each step clearly requiring concentrated effort. You and James support her on either side, while Elizabeth leads the way, her own movement hampered by painful joints, but her determination unwavering. "Almost there," she encourages as the mission comes into view. A narrow building wedged between a chandler's shop and a dingy pub. Its only distinguishing feature is a small cross painted above the door, faded by London's perpetual grime but still visible. The mission is already busy despite the early hour. A line of ragged figures waits outside for the daily bread distribution, while others sit on benches in the small front room, warming themselves by a meagre fire. A harried-looking woman in a plain dark dress moves between them, dispensing what appears to be medicine from a small bottle. "Sister Agnes," Elizabeth identifies her, leaning close to speak in your ear. "Strict but fair, better than most who deal with our sort." You help Hannah to a bench near the door, the closest available seat. Her breathing has worsened with the exertion of the walk, each inhalation now a visible struggle that shakes her entire frame. Sister Agnes notices your arrival immediately, her experienced eye clearly registering Hannah's condition. She finishes with her current patient, an elderly man with a bandaged hand, before approaching your group. "Elizabeth," she greets, her voice neither warm nor cold, simply efficient. "Been a while since you visited us." "Not for myself today," Elizabeth replies, nodding toward Hannah. "She needs help. Bad chest, getting worse." The sister assesses Hannah with a professional gaze, noting the laboured breathing, the pallor, the evident weakness. Without speaking, she kneels and presses an ear to Hannah's chest, listening to the sounds within. Pneumonia, most likely, she diagnoses after a moment, though possibly something more chronic underneath. She straightens, her expression grave but not unkind. We have 2 beds free in the women's dormitory. She can stay, at least until the worst passes. Relief washes through your small group. You had expected more resistance, more questions, perhaps even outright refusal. "What's the requirement?" James asks, voicing the skepticism that experience has taught all of you. No charity comes without conditions, without some price to be paid in behaviour or beliefs. "Prayers morning and evening," Sister Agnes answers matter-of-factly. "Temperance pledge? Basic cleanliness as far as possible." She pauses, then adds, "and a willingness to accept help, which is often the hardest requirement for some." This last comment is directed at Hannah, who has remained silent throughout the exchange. She meets the sister's gaze for a long moment, then gives a small nod, acceptance of both the conditions and the larger surrender they represent. "I'll need someone to help get her cleaned up." Sister Agnes continues, looking at you and Elizabeth. "We can't put her in a bed as she is." The implication is clear. Hannah's clothes, like all of yours, are filthy from weeks or months of continuous wear without proper washing. The accumulated grime of street life clings to every fibre, along with less mentionable infestations that are the near inevitable companions of extreme poverty. "I'll stay and help," you volunteer, knowing that Elizabeth needs to return to the steps to rest her own ailing body. "I'll come back tomorrow with news," Elizabeth promises Hannah, gently patting her shoulder in farewell. "Rest and get stronger. The steps will wait." James also takes his leave, with a gruff "get well" that contains more emotion than his expression would suggest. The bond between crawlers may be born of necessity rather than choice, but it's no less real for that. As they depart, Sister Agnes leads you and Hannah toward a back room. "We'll need to burn the clothes," she informs you, without preamble, too far gone to save, and likely carrying all manner of things we don't want in the dormitory. Hannah makes a small sound of distress at this. For someone with so few possessions, even ragged clothing represents a significant portion of worldly wealth. "We have donations," the sister adds, correctly interpreting Hannah's reaction. "Nothing fine, but clean and whole. You'll be better for it." The back room contains a large metal tub, partially filled with water that steams faintly in the cool air. Simple screens provide minimal privacy, and shelves along one wall hold stacks of plain, well-worn but clean clothing. "I'll leave you to it," Sister Agnes says, indicating the tub. "Call when you're ready for the fresh things, and be thorough. We can't risk bringing anything into the dormitory that might spread." Alone with Hannah, you help her undress with the matter-of-fact efficiency that life on the streets has taught you. Modesty is a luxury that extreme circumstances rarely permit. Her body, revealed in stages as the layers of filthy clothing come away, tells its own story of deprivation. Each rib clearly visible, collarbones protruding sharply, the skin mottled with bruises of varying ages from sleeping on hard surfaces. The water in the tub is lukewarm at best, but compared to your usual state, it feels like remarkable luxury. You help Hannah in, supporting her weakened frame as she sinks into the first proper bath either of you has experienced in months. "God, that's good," she murmurs, the most words she's spoken all day. Her eyes close briefly in simple pleasure, transcending for a moment the pain and illness that have dominated her existence. You work quickly but thoroughly, using the harsh yellow soap provided to tackle the ingrained dirt of street life. The water darkens almost immediately, a visible reminder of the conditions you've all been living in. Hannah submits to the process with passive acceptance, conserving her limited energy. When she's as clean as the circumstances allow, you call for Sister Agnes, who returns with a bundle of clothing, simple cotton undergarments, a plain dress of faded blue, woolen stockings darned in multiple places. Best we have in her size, the sister explains, helping you dress Hannah in her new attire. The dormitory is this way when she's ready. The women's dormitory proves to be a long, narrow room containing 12 iron bedsteads arranged in 2 rows. Most are occupied, their inhabitants in various states of illness or debility. The 2 empty beds are at the far end, near a window that provides the room's only ventilation. She'll be more comfortable here, Sister Agnes assures you as you help Hannah settle onto one of the vacant beds. The thin mattress and single blanket would seem austere in any other context, but compared to the workhouse steps, it's unimaginable comfort. "Thank you," you tell Hannah softly as she sinks back against the pillow, her exhaustion evident in every line of her body, "for letting us help." She manages a small smile, the effort clearly costing her. "Come back," she whispers, a rare vulnerability showing through her usual stoic facade. "Of course," you promise, "as soon as they'll let me visit." Leaving her is harder than you expected. Despite the obvious benefits of the mission's care compared to the steps, there's something wrenching about walking away, about breaking the small community that has been formed through shared hardship. Sister Agnes walks you to the door. "She's very weak," she says quietly, professional assessment tempered with compassion. "I can't promise anything, but we'll do our best." "I know," you acknowledge. The reality of Hannah's condition isn't lost on you or any of the crawlers. Street life wears bodies down to breaking point, and once seriously ill, recovery is never certain. "Visit tomorrow afternoon," the sister advises. "She'll need familiar faces, something to hold on to beyond these walls." With a final nod of thanks, you step back into the street, feeling strangely disoriented without Hannah beside you. The walk back to the steps seems longer somehow, the familiar streets made unfamiliar by her absence. When you return, the group's dynamics have shifted in your absence. Scotty has departed for her bookkeeping work at the coffee shop, her nervous anticipation palpable as she left. William has returned briefly from the market with an unexpected treasure. A paper bag containing broken biscuits, slightly stale, but still entirely edible. "Manager says they can't sell them," he explains as he distributes the bounty among those present. "Would have been thrown out." "Hannah?" Mary asks as you settle back onto the steps, accepting your portion of biscuit with murmured thanks. "At the mission," you confirm, "they had a bed free. Sister Agnes thinks it's pneumonia." Elizabeth nods, unsurprised by the diagnosis. "And the prognosis?" You hesitate, not wanting to voice the gravity of the situation too explicitly. "She's in the right place," you say finally. "Better chance there than here." This simple truth is accepted without further comment. On the steps, illness is a familiar adversary, and its potential consequences understood without need for elaboration. "Scotty seemed hopeful about the work," James comments, changing the subject to less somber territory. "Almost excited, I'd say." "First real work in ages," Mary observes. "Course she's excited. Chance to use her mind instead of just surviving." The conversation turns to the various small improvements in circumstances that have emerged in recent days. William's market job, Scotty's bookkeeping, the continued possibility of the hop fields, even the simple luxury of the blankets that now belong to your group. "Sarah stopped by earlier," Mary informs you, "looking for William. Says the charitable ladies are satisfied with the market arrangement for now. They're giving her a month to find more permanent solutions." "A month's a lifetime," Elizabeth comments. "All sorts might change in that time." The observation carries weight coming from her. At her age, with her experience of street life's precariousness, Elizabeth rarely speculates beyond the immediate future. This willingness to consider longer time frames suggests a cautious optimism that's as unusual as it is contagious. The day passes with the slow rhythm that characterizes life on the steps when no crisis demands immediate attention. People come and go, William returning to the market after his brief visit, James venturing out to check on rumours of a new soup kitchen, Elizabeth dozing in the weak sunlight that occasionally breaks through London's perpetual cloud cover. Late afternoon brings Scotty back from her first day of work, her tall figure moving with slightly more energy than usual as she approaches. "Well?" Mary asks simply as Scotty settles onto her usual spot. "Well indeed," Scotty replies, a rare smile briefly illuminating her gaunt features. "The books were in terrible disorder. No proper system at all, but I've made a start on organising them." "And Parker, was he satisfied?" Elizabeth inquires. Scotty nods, her natural dignity enhanced somehow by the day's meaningful labour. "He seemed pleased, asked if I could come again on Friday to continue. Another sixpence." The sum represents wealth almost beyond imagining from your current perspective, enough for a proper meal or a night's lodging in a decent house, or saved toward the greater goal of returning to respectable employment. What will you do with it, you ask, genuinely curious about her priorities. Scotty considers the question seriously. Save toward a room, she decides after a moment. Even the smallest place with an address would make finding regular work possible, and proper clothes eventually. Her plan mirrors what she's previously described as her route back to respectability. An address to give employers decent clothing to wear to interviews, the basic foundations of a life beyond the steps. The mission might help with clothes, you suggest, thinking of the clean garments provided to Hannah if you attended their Sunday services. Scotty's expression tightens slightly. Perhaps, though their charity often comes with more sermons than I can stomach. Her resistance to institutional assistance remains strong, even as her circumstances begin to improve through her own efforts. You understand the impulse. To accept help is to cede control, to become subject to others' judgment and requirements. Independence, even in extreme poverty, carries its own fierce dignity. The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of William. Returning from his day at the market, he carries another small bundle. More food salvaged from the day's trade, you assume. "How's the work?" his mother asks as he joins your circle. "Good," he answers, unwrapping his bundle to reveal several slightly bruised apples and half a loaf of bread that's only beginning to stale. "Manager says I've got a knack for arranging the displays, wants me to come earlier tomorrow to help with the setup." The pride in his voice is unmistakable, not just the satisfaction of earning, but the deeper pleasure of being valued, of having skill recognized. It's a transformation from the sullen boy who once deemed any work beneath him, who gave himself airs above his station, despite his desperate circumstances. The food is shared among your reduced group, portions slightly larger than usual due to Hannah's absence. The simple mathematics of survival, fewer mouths, more for each, creates a complex emotional equation. Relief at slightly eased hunger mingles with concern for your missing member, guilt at benefiting from her absence, hope for her recovery. "We should save some for Sarah and Agnes," William suggests, setting aside one of the apples and a portion of bread. "They'll be by after the coffee shop closes." This consideration for others, this planning beyond immediate needs, marks another shift in William's character. The steps breed a certain necessary selfishness. Survival leaves little room for generosity, but his expanding horizons seem to have expanded his capacity for thought beyond his own immediate circumstances. As evening approaches, the temperature drops noticeably, the lingering damp from yesterday's rain creating a bone-deep chill that even the precious blankets can only partially alleviate. You huddle closer together, the reduced size of your group requiring a reconfiguration of your usual arrangement. "Feels wrong without Hannah," James observes, voicing what you've all been feeling, like missing a limb. "She's better where she is," Elizabeth reminds him, practical as always. Warm bed, medicine, people who know what they're doing. "Still feels wrong," he insists. "Been with us so long, feels like she should be here no matter what." The sentiment resonates with all of you. The bonds formed on the steps aren't chosen or even necessarily desired, but they're real nonetheless, forged through shared hardship, mutual dependence, the complicated intimacy of surviving together at the margins of society. "We'll visit tomorrow," you remind him, offering what comfort you can. "See how she's doing." The conversation ebbs as darkness falls, the street lamps casting weak pools of light that barely reach your huddled group. The night brings its own challenges. Increased cold, the subtle but real increase in danger as less savoury elements claim the streets, the long hours of half-sleep that never quite provide proper rest. "Heard something today," James says suddenly, breaking the contemplative silence that had settled over you all, "at the soup kitchen, about the hop fields." This immediately captures everyone's attention. The hop fields have assumed an almost mythical status in your collective imagination, a potential escape route, a chance at something better, a specific goal to work toward rather than mere daily survival. "They're taking names at the Bull and Crown starting Monday," he continues. "Wagon leaves 2 weeks after, deposit still $1 per person." The timeline gives shape to what has been an abstract possibility. 2 weeks plus a day until the wagons leave. A specific date to prepare for, to save toward, to measure progress against. William's market work and Scotty's bookkeeping, Elizabeth calculates aloud. If they can save most of it, that's deposits for at least 2, maybe 3 people. "Sarah says she can help with 1 deposit," William adds. "For me, since I'm watching Agnes." The logistics begin to take form. Who might go, who would stay, how resources could be pooled to maximise the opportunity. It's the most concrete planning your group has engaged in, a marked contrast to the usual focus on immediate survival. "What about Hannah?" you ask. The question that's been lurking at the edges of the conversation. If she recovers enough. The uncertainty hangs in the air. Hannah's illness adds a variable that none of you can control or predict, even if she survives, and that remains a significant if. Whether she'll be strong enough for field work in 2 weeks is highly doubtful. "One day at a time," Elizabeth counsels, her standard response to speculation that stretches too far into an unpredictable future. "See how she is tomorrow. Make decisions as we need to." The wisdom in this approach is undeniable. Street life teaches, if nothing else, the futility of counting too heavily on specific outcomes. Circumstances change too quickly, fortunes reverse too easily to invest too much in any single plan. Still, as you settle into your usual position for the night, blanket pulled close around your shoulders, the hop fields shimmer at the edge of your thoughts like a distant light. Not quite reachable, perhaps, but visible now in a way it wasn't before, a specific possibility rather than a vague hope. Sarah arrives with Agnes as the night deepens, having finished her shift at the coffee shop. The child is half asleep in her arms, rousing only slightly when transferred to the makeshift bed created from one of the blankets. "Mr. Parker mentioned Scotty," Sarah tells your group as she settles beside her daughter. "Said she has a real gift with numbers, asked her to come twice next week instead of just once." This news travels through your circle with a ripple of subdued pleasure. Scotty's success, however modest, feels like a victory for all of you, proof that the gap between the steps and respectability can be bridged, that skills and knowledge aren't entirely erased by circumstances. And he asked after Hannah, Sarah continues. I told him she's at the mission now. He said to tell her the hot water for tea will be waiting when she's well enough to come back. The simple kindness, acknowledging Hannah's absence, holding her place in the small community that extends beyond just the steps, brings an unexpected tightness to your throat in a world that largely treats the destitute as invisible or interchangeable. Being remembered as an individual carries profound meaning. As the conversations quiet and most of your group drifts towards sleep, you find yourself more wakeful than usual. The day's events, Hannah's move to the mission, Scotty's successful work, the increasingly concrete plans for the hop fields have stirred something that daily survival usually suppresses: hope. Hope is dangerous on the streets. It creates expectations that reality rarely fulfills, sets up disappointments that can crush what little spirit remains after prolonged hardship. Most crawlers learn to live without it, focusing instead on the immediate, the tangible, the certain. But tonight, huddled on the familiar discomfort of the workhouse steps, wrapped in the unexpected luxury of an actual blanket, surrounded by companions whose stories and struggles you know as intimately as your own, hope feels not like a threat but like a fragile, precious possibility. Not hope for dramatic transformation, you're too experienced for such fantasies, but hope for small improvements, for incremental steps away from the edge of existence, a room instead of steps, regular work instead of scavenging, health instead of constant illness, community instead of isolation. William stirs beside you, not fully awake but murmuring in the half-sleep that passes for rest among the crawlers. Market tomorrow, he mumbles, the words barely distinguishable. Early, got to be early. Even in sleep, his mind holds on to the responsibility, the opportunity, that has begun to reshape his understanding of himself. No longer just the boy or Mary's son, but William, with work and purpose and a place, however humble, in the broader world. You close your eyes, allowing yourself to drift toward your own uneasy rest. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, a visit to Hannah, Scotty's continued hopes for regular work, the ongoing calculations about the hop fields. But for this moment, on this night, the steps feel less like the end of all possibilities and more like a temporary station on a journey that might, just might, lead elsewhere. A week passes with the steady rhythm that defines life on the steps, a routine of small victories and setbacks, moments of progress interspersed with reminders of how precarious your situation remains. Hannah's condition at the mission improves gradually, though more slowly than any of you would hope. Daily visits from different members of your group confirm what Sister Agnes had suggested from the beginning. Recovery, if it comes, will be a lengthy process. The pneumonia has weakened lungs already compromised by years of London's smoke and damp, by inadequate nutrition and constant exposure. She's sitting up today, James reports after his afternoon visit. Managed a full bowl of broth. Sister Agnes says that's progress. Did she speak? Mary asks, the question carrying more weight than might be apparent to an outsider. Among the crawlers, the will to communicate often indicates the will to live, a choice made daily, hourly, against considerable odds. James nods. Asked about all of you. Wanted to know if William's still at the market, if Scotty got more bookkeeping work. These simple inquiries, maintaining connection to the small community of the steps despite physical separation, feel significant. Hannah hasn't surrendered to the institutional isolation that often claims those who move from streets to charity wards. She remains, in her mind at least, one of you, one of Scotty's fortunes continue to improve in modest but meaningful ways. Mr. Parker has indeed increased her work to 2 afternoons weekly, the extra sixpence allowing her to expand her careful calculations about eventual escape from the steps. Found a woman on Tottenham Court Road, she informs your group one evening, her usual reserve softened by cautious optimism. Rents a back kitchen as a room, says she'd share for 18 pence a week. That's steep, Elizabeth observes, the assessment coming from decades of London experience rather than criticism. For a proper address, worth it, Scotty counters, and split between 2, more manageable than trying alone. The simple math of survival in London, the constant calculations of pennies earned against pennies spent, of what constitutes necessity versus luxury, underlies every decision. 18 pence weekly for a shared room would be insignificant to most working Londoners, but from the perspective of the steps, it represents both tantalising possibility and daunting challenge. How much saved so far? James asks, the question practical rather than intrusive. In your small community, financial matters are collective concerns rather than private affairs. Nearly 4 shillings, Scotty answers, the pride in her voice unmistakable. Another few weeks of work and I might manage first month's rent plus enough for decent clothes. The sum is impressive given her starting point, a testament to ruthless saving and the self-denial that comes naturally to someone who has already lost nearly everything. Most in her position would have spent something on immediate comforts, better food perhaps, or a night's lodging during particularly bad weather. Scotty's focus remains fixed on the longer goal, unwavering despite daily discomforts. William's transformation continues, his market work expanding from simple labour to responsibilities that suggest his employer sees potential beyond mere strong arms. He's now entrusted with arranging displays, tracking inventory, occasionally handling money for smaller transactions. Manager says I've got a head for figures, he reports, echoing Scotty's own unexpected opportunity. Might train me for more if I stay on after the hop fields. This casual mention, after the hop fields, confirms what's become increasingly clear. The seasonal work that once seemed your group's only hope for collective improvement has shifted in significance. For William at least, it now represents a temporary diversion from a potentially more sustainable path rather than the sole escape route. You're still planning to go? Mary asks her son, the question carefully neutral despite the obvious implications for her own future. William nods. Promised Sarah I'd help with her deposit too. She's counting on it for Agnes's sake, but I'll come back to the market after. Manager's holding my place. The ability to plan across multiple time frames, to commit to the hop fields while simultaneously maintaining his position at the market, marks another step in William's maturation. From the boy who once refused to sell matches out of misplaced pride, he's become someone who navigates complex obligations and understands the value of reliable income, however modest. Sarah and Agnes visit the steps most evenings after the coffee shop closes, their presence now a regular part of your small community's rhythm. The child has grown more comfortable with the arrangement, no longer clinging fearfully to her mother, but interacting with all of you, particularly William, whose position as her occasional caretaker has evolved into something more like an older brother. The charitable ladies came by again, Sarah informs you, during one such visit, checked on Agnes at the market, seemed satisfied, though they mentioned proper schooling ought to be arranged eventually. Is there even a school that would take her? James asks, the question reflecting the harsh realities of London's educational system, where even the most basic instruction often remains inaccessible to the children of the very poor. Ragged school on Compton Street might, Elizabeth suggests. They take the poorest, ask no questions about circumstances. Teaching's basic, but it's something. The very discussion, education for a child whose mother barely maintains the most precarious hold on respectability, would have seemed absurdly optimistic just weeks ago. Now it feels like a natural extension of the small improvements that have begun to accumulate around your group. Not dramatic transformations, but incremental steps away from mere survival towards something that might cautiously be called living. The hop fields remain a central topic of conversation, particularly as Monday approaches, the day when names will be taken at the Bull and Crown for the wagons leaving 2 weeks later. The calculations have grown more complex as circumstances have evolved. The decision about who should go no longer a simple matter of who has access to the shilling deposit. "I'm thinking I shouldn't," Scotty announces during one such discussion, the declaration surprising given her previously expressed interest. "The bookkeeping with Parker is steady. If I leave for weeks, that opportunity vanishes, and I'm closer to a room than I've been in years." Her logic is sound, the bird in hand versus two in the bush as the proverb goes. The guaranteed sixpence twice weekly from Mr. Parker, with the possibility of more regular work to come, presents a clearer path to her specific goals than the uncertain income of seasonal labour, however potentially lucrative. "Makes sense," Elizabeth agrees, "especially at your age, with your skills. Better to build on what you've started here." The assessment isn't meant unkindly, simply a practical recognition that hop picking is young person's work, physically demanding in ways that would be particularly difficult for someone of Scotty's years and physical condition. Her value lies in her mind, her education, her ability with numbers and accounts, not in the brutal labour of the fields. What about Hannah, you ask? The question that's hovered at the edge of these discussions for days. If she's not well enough. "She won't be," Elizabeth states with the flat certainty of experience. "Even if the pneumonia resolves completely, which it likely won't, she'll be too weak for field work for months, not weeks." This realistic assessment, while difficult to hear, helps clarify the evolving plans, with Hannah remaining at the mission for the foreseeable future and Scotty pursuing her bookkeeping opportunity. The Hopfields contingent has narrowed to a more focused group. William, who's committed to going, Sarah, who sees it as a chance to secure her position as Agnes's mother in the eyes of the charitable ladies, and potentially one or two others from the steps, depending on available deposits. "I'm still planning on it," James states, his determination evident, "nothing holding me here that can't wait a few weeks." "And you?" Elizabeth asks, turning to you with her characteristic directness. "What's your thinking?" The question gives you pause. Unlike some in your group, you haven't acquired a specific new opportunity that might be jeopardized by temporary absence, but the steps have provided a kind of stability, however minimal, familiar discomfort rather than the unknown challenges of the fields. "I think I should go," you decide after reflection. 4 of us together would be safer than 3. And between William's market work and what Sarah's saved, we might manage the deposits. The plan crystallizes through these conversations. William, Sarah, James and you pooling resources for the wagon deposits, travelling together to the hop fields for the season, then returning to London with whatever earnings you manage to secure. Not a permanent escape from poverty perhaps, but a potential stepping stone toward better circumstances. "Monday then," William confirms. "Bull and Crown to put down names and deposits." The specificity is both reassuring and mildly terrifying, a concrete step beyond talk into action, beyond possibility into commitment. After so long focusing solely on daily survival, planning weeks ahead feels almost like tempting fate. Sunday brings unexpected brightness, the perpetual London clouds parting to allow genuine sunshine to warm the steps. The psychological effect is immediate. Spirits lift, conversations take on a more optimistic tone, even bodies seem to respond with slightly less discomfort than usual. "Good omen," Elizabeth declares, turning her face toward the rare warmth. "Sun shining on your plans." "Or just a brief respite before more rain," James counters, though without his usual pessimism. "Either way, I'll take it." The improved weather allows for an excursion that would normally be considered an unnecessary expenditure of energy, a group visit to Hannah at the Mission rather than the usual practice of one or two representatives going while the others conserve strength. You find her noticeably improved from your last visit, sitting up in bed with colour returned to her previously ashen cheeks. The dreadful wheezing has subsided to occasional coughs, and while she remains alarmingly thin, there's an alertness in her eyes that had been absent before. "The whole tribe," she greets your group with genuine pleasure. "To what do I owe this honour?" "Sunshine," Elizabeth explains simply, "makes everything seem possible." Hannah's gaze moves from face to face, taking in what must be visible changes in all of you. William's newfound confidence, Scotty's cautious optimism, the collective sense of purpose that has begun to replace mere resigned endurance. "Sister Agnes says I can get up tomorrow," she informs you. "Just to sit in the day room, not outside yet, but it's progress." "Wonderful news," Mary says warmly, settling carefully on the edge of Hannah's bed. "You look much better." The conversation flows easily, updates exchanged about developments on the steps, plans for the hop fields, Scotty's continued bookkeeping success. Hannah listens with evident interest, maintaining connection to the community despite her physical separation from it. "Will you come back?" she asks finally, the question directed at all of you, but particularly those planning the Hopfield journey. After, I mean. The query contains layers of meaning. Concern about being abandoned, yes, but also genuine curiosity about whether your collective future still includes the steps, or whether these various small opportunities might lead to permanent dispersal of the group that has sustained all of you through the worst of times. "Some of us certainly," Elizabeth answers, her gaze encompassing those who aren't part of the Hopfield plan. "And the others, well, they'll come back at least to visit, I'd wager. Bonds formed on the steps don't break easily." It's as close to sentimentality as Elizabeth ever allows herself, but the simple statement acknowledges what has become increasingly clear. The connections between you are no longer merely practical arrangements for mutual survival. Something deeper has developed, not family exactly, but a community bound by shared experience, mutual understanding, and genuine concern for each other's welfare. "And you'll have a place when you're well enough to leave here," Scotty adds, addressing Hannah directly, "whether it's the steps or wherever else we might be by then." The tentative nature of this promise, the acknowledgement that circumstances remain fluid, future locations uncertain, doesn't diminish its significance. In a world where the destitute are typically treated as interchangeable units rather than individuals, being specifically included in others' plans represents profound recognition. Your visit concludes with Sister Agnes's appearance, gently but firmly announcing that Hannah needs rest. You leave with promises to return, with assurances that Monday's expedition to the Bull and Crown will be reported in full detail, with the comfortable certainty that Hannah remains part of your circle despite her physical absence from the steps. The walk back is leisurely by necessity. Elizabeth's arthritis and James's lingering chest ailment from the recent rains mean a pace that allows frequent pauses, but the sunshine continues, and for once the slowness feels like a luxury rather than a limitation, an opportunity to observe London on a rare, pleasant day. Strange to think, Mary comments as you near the steps, how much has changed in such a short time. William working, Scotty with her bookkeeping, Hannah getting better, the hop fields becoming real rather than just talk. Don't tempt fate, James cautions, his habitual pessimism reasserting itself slightly. Nothing's certain yet. Or, no, Elizabeth agrees, but hope isn't the same as certainty. Sometimes it's enough just to see the possibility of something better, even if it doesn't all work out exactly as planned. This wisdom, earned through decades of London's harshest lessons, settles over your group as you reclaim your usual places on the workhouse steps. The stone remains hard, your circumstances still defined by extreme poverty, your future far from secure. But something has shifted, a subtle but significant change in how you collectively view your situation. Not as an endpoint, but as a temporary station, not as an identity, but as a circumstance, not as fate, but as a challenge that might, with effort and some measure of luck, be overcome. As evening approaches and the day's unusual warmth fades, William returns from his market duties with what has become a welcome routine. Salvaged food that would otherwise be discarded, today including several slightly bruised pears and a half loaf of bread that's perfectly edible despite being deemed too stale for paying customers. Manager says there might be extra work tomorrow, he reports as he distributes these treasures. Big delivery coming in that needs sorting before dawn. You should rest then, his mother advises, practical as always. Early night if you're to be up before light. William nods, accepting both the suggestion and the underlying concern with new maturity. Just need to tell Sarah about Monday when she comes by, then sleep. Scotty returns shortly after, her tall figure immediately recognisable as she approaches from the direction of the coffee shop. There's a subtle but noticeable difference in her bearing, still the characteristic shuffling gait necessitated by her inadequate footwear, but her posture more upright, her movements more purposeful. Parker's books are finally making sense, she announces as she joins your circle, accepting her portion of pear with murmured thanks. 3 years of complete disorder, but I've established a proper system now. He's lucky to have found you, Elizabeth observes. Skilled bookkeepers don't usually work for sixpence an afternoon. Scotty acknowledges this with a small smile, his gain for now, but mine too in the long run. A reference from a respectable business will be invaluable when seeking more substantial employment. Again, the calculation extends beyond immediate benefit to longer-term strategy, a perspective that would have seemed almost absurdly optimistic just weeks ago when survival to the next day represented the limit of reasonable planning. As darkness settles over London and the first stars become visible in a sky unusually clear of both clouds and smoke, your group arranges itself for the night in what has become a familiar pattern. The precious blankets are distributed according to need, bodies positioned to share warmth while maintaining the minimal personal space that dignity requires. Sarah arrives with Agnes, later than usual due to extra work at the coffee shop. The child is already asleep in her arms, transferred carefully to the makeshift bed created from one of the blankets without waking. "Everything set for tomorrow?" Sarah asks William quietly, referring to the planned visit to the Bull and Crown. He nods, their shared purpose creating a bond that transcends their different circumstances. James has the deposits saved. I've spoken to the manager about taking an hour at midday. We'll put our names down, all 4 of us. The simple confirmation that tomorrow will bring concrete action rather than just continued discussion settles over your group with a weight that's both anxious and expectant. After so long focusing exclusively on immediate survival, committing to a plan that extends weeks into the future represents a significant shift in perspective. Night deepens around the workhouse steps, the street growing quiet except for occasional passing figures, late workers heading home, constables on their rounds, others like yourselves seeking places to weather the dark hours, the familiar sounds of London after dark, distant carriage wheels, muffled voices from nearby buildings, the perpetual background noise of a city that never truly sleeps, create an acoustic landscape that has become, strangely, almost comforting in its consistency. Do you ever wonder, you ask, the question emerging from the contemplative mood that often accompanies these quieter moments, what it might be like, after the hop fields, I mean, if things actually change? The query hangs in the air between you, touching on hopes too fragile to be frequently examined, possibilities too easily shattered by disappointment to be regularly contemplated. Sometimes, Mary admits after a thoughtful pause, not grand visions, just a room, walls, a bed that's not stone steps, simple things. Work that uses what I know, Scotty adds softly, not just survival but contribution, purpose beyond making it through another day. Seeing Agnes grow up proper, Sarah murmurs, her hand gently resting on her sleeping daughter's back. School, maybe. A trade eventually. A better chance than I had. Dignity, Elizabeth summarises, the single word encompassing all these modest aspirations. That's what it comes to in the end. Not wealth or comfort even, just the basic dignity of being seen as a person, not a problem. The simplicity of these dreams, desires that most Londoners would consider basic rights rather than ambitious goals, underscores the profound gap between your current circumstances and even the most minimal definition of adequate living. Yet tonight, under stars rarely visible through London's perpetual haze, these modest hopes feel not like fantasy, but like possibilities within reach. We should sleep, William reminds everyone, practical concerns reasserting themselves. Tomorrow's important. The suggestion is accepted without argument. Bodies settle more firmly against the familiar stone of the steps, blankets drawn close against the night chill. The patterns of shared warmth arranged with the unconscious efficiency of long practice. Unlike many nights on the steps, sleep comes relatively easily this evening, perhaps due to the unusual exertion of the longer walk to visit Hannah, perhaps because of the psychological comfort of plans taking concrete form, perhaps simply because the absence of rain allows for marginally greater physical comfort than usual. As you drift toward rest, the images that float through your mind are not of the hardships that have defined recent memory, but of possibilities branching forward. The hop fields with their promise of earned money, William's expanding role at the market, Scotty's path back toward respected employment, Hannah's gradual recovery, Sarah's strengthened claim to raise her own child. Not certainties by any means. The gap between possibility and reality remains substantial, the potential for disappointment ever present. But tonight, on these same steps that have witnessed so much suffering, so much endurance, so much bare survival, something new has taken root, alongside the usual resignation and determined stoicism. Hope, cautious, tentative, realistic, but hope nonetheless. Your thoughts slow as sleep approaches, the familiar discomforts of the hard stone and inadequate shelter receding as consciousness dims. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, its own decisions, its own blend of setbacks and small victories. For now, there is just this moment of peaceful transition, this brief interval between waking struggle and dreaming possibility. As you finally surrender to sleep, one last thought surfaces, not about the hop fields or rooms with walls or any specific vision of improved circumstances, but simply an acknowledgement of the present, that even here, on the workhouse steps, among the poorest of London's poor human connection, persists. That dignity can be found and maintained even in the harshest conditions. That small kindnesses, a shared blanket, a saved crust of bread, a hand offered in support, make survival not just possible but meaningful. And with that gentle recognition, sleep claims you fully, your breathing falling into rhythm with those around you, your dreams touching briefly on better days that might, just might, lie ahead.